Good evening, everybody. Members of the public are advised the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream and video recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. Please note that this special future Nillumbik committee meeting is a continuation of the future Nillumbik committee meeting held on the 11th of August 2020, which was adjourned in accordance with clause 8.3 and 8.7 of the Meeting Procedure Local Law 2017. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders, both past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. We have no apologies. And I would just ask if there are any conflicts of interest, if councillors would like to raise their hand. If not, we'll go straight into the first item, which is FN 02520, the use and development of the land for agriculture, olive grove, lemons and herbs, a restaurant in conjunction with agriculture, sale and consumption of liquor, associated buildings and works, and the installation of display of business identification signage at 103 Bannons Lane, Yarrambat. So we have a number of submitters this evening, and the first person we have is Matt Dillon on behalf of Professional Consulting Services, and Matt is present in the studio. So I'll just... Matt, can you unmute yourself? Having a bit of a technical difficulty here.
Can you hear me now, Mayor?
We can. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Fire away. You have 3 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask you some questions.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor and councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Dillon's my name. I'm the business consultant acting on behalf of the applicant. Applications of this nature have in fact been supported by council planning services over time. It should be noted that a number of licensed and non-licensed premises associated with agricultural use or no agricultural use currently operate across this municipality and beyond. Some identified on-street external parking issues certainly apply right across the region: Eltham, Hurstbridge, Research, Diamond Creek, etc. This has been acknowledged previously by Councillor Clark during his previous mayoral position with the council. There are no car parking or traffic issues of any nature that apply with this application. Surrounding land use equals wineries, restaurants, cafes, nurseries, sporting golf clubs in this area. The key points as follows in response to a number of objections raised are as follows. The proposal is a paddock to plate business concept. It meets strategic planning policy. It's a joint proposal to council that will provide local employment and economic development. No doubt about that. Benefit. The use is genuine with a close and continuous functional relationship in its operation with the other use, a functional connection with agriculture and restaurant use. The proposed use is considered appropriate by council in light of surrounding land uses. It protects and enhances the environment, agricultural and landscape qualities of the site and surrounds with no impact whatsoever. Agricultural use on the land will in fact be maintained and actually increased from previous and existing use on the land parcel in direct association and connection to the proposed restaurant use. There's no adverse impact on the surrounding land use. Existing rural character is preserved. The land is capable to accommodate the proposed use and development. The liquor licence is also deemed appropriate by council. The modest proposal restaurant is not a nightclub. It's not a hotel. It's not a club. It's not a bar of any description of any nature. No external music or any live or amplified music applies. Council Planning Services and Building Department have supported the land proposal. Council Economic Development Management and Tourism team have also welcomed and totally supported this particular joint proposal with open arms on the 11th of November 2019. Council's Environmental Planner, their Land Management Officer, have stated that the proposed use is appropriate for plant species and land space available. Victoria Police have supported the proposal. The Victorian Commission for Gaming and Liquor Regulation has supported the proposal. All potential noise and amenity impacts raised have certainly been addressed by VCGLR with very stringent liquor licence conditions set in place. This includes a planning services notice of decision, which includes some 49 very stringent additional planning permit conditions set in place, which clearly addresses and demonstrates all concerns raised. There's no loss of productive agricultural land, no detriment to agricultural sustainability of the area. The natural environment is maintained, flora and fauna is maintained. This is a genuine agriculture use as supported by a very detailed farm management plan. Ladies and gentlemen, objections relating to antisocial behaviour, littering, vandalism, pedestrian safety and
Thanks, Matt. I'm sorry I have to stop you there, but we've got a lot of submitters tonight. But stay on the line. Councillors may wish to ask you a question.
Yeah, disappointing. I just had some very important points, but I would have thought I could be afforded another 30 seconds, but never mind.
I'm sorry, everybody will get the same tonight.
Yeah, I struggle with the 3-minute time frame, I'm afraid, but that's the way it is.
I do too.
Yeah.
Councillors, any questions for Matt? Councillor Brooker. You muted yourself.
Got a screen message saying the host has muted me, so
just let me unmute you tonight.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Look, there's in the report, and there's a number of areas I could go to. I think it's unfortunate, really, that for various reasons, COVID being one, there hasn't been a pre-application meeting where I guess some residents could have put some questions to you directly. So I'll just start off by putting a couple. In item 35 of the report, dot point 35, I'm hoping you've got it in front of you there. It states the operation of a restaurant on the site will no doubt be noticeable within the immediate locality. So is that something, and then goes on to talk about how there's conditions around it that ameliorate that. But is it your position, from what you just said, with no impact whatsoever, that you would disagree with this officer assessment, that it will no doubt be noticeable?
I totally disagree with that. Unlike other applications over many years that I've dealt with, where we have substantial restaurants virtually next door adjoining residential interface, we've got a clear separation distance of some 200 to 250 metres away from any adjoining residential interface on this rural land property. So this is why I'm making that comment. There's no impact whatsoever in our view. In fact, the property at 50 Edward Henty Avenue faces in the opposite direction. It actually faces onto Edward Henty Avenue with a number of farm sheds behind the house. So this particular shed, the farm shed is totally obscured from that particular residential property. That's just one example.
Okay, so is it your view then that the report calls for an acoustic report to, I think, take into account of the local considerations of properties, of that property being near the top of a hill and the other properties being somewhat lower than that? Is it your position that one of the conditions of an acoustic report is not required?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. This is a standard condition that we were subjected to with planning permit applications of this nature, Councillor. You're aware of that, and as am I. So, look, I did expect an acoustic report. However, I make the point, with the acoustic measures and the attenuation measures that are going to be subject to the building construction works, the location, the position of the shed, it's well insulated, as I said, in my position by design. In itself, it's well insulated. But look, we do accept an acoustic report requirement. I've spoken to my client about this. As I said, it is somewhat surprising, however, but I'd expect it if the restaurant was next door to residential use, like the golf club and like other licensed premises in the Yarrambat area. However, if it's required, we'll certainly abide by those conditions, Councillor.
All right. You made some statements that there were numerous other, I think, activities, be it golf clubs and, well, there was a number of things, licensed premises and so on. Yep. Isn't it true, though, that none of those licensed premises, like the golf club, have a license for 10 p.m. at night?
Well, I question that because my research with the golf club, as an example, they do trade at night. And I note, Councillor, that their car park in particular is directly against or next to some residential interface. So I do question it. I'm of the understanding with our research conducted that just one example where they do in fact trade at night also.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get some clarification of that later tonight.
I did speak to some golf club members and they did say to me some time ago that they did have functions of an evening at the golf club.
But not on a regular basis.
No, but you asked me about
okay.
That. They do have.
Yeah, it's not.
Times.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brooker?
Oh, look, I would. Well, I think I'll rest there, but for now, thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors.
Don't go yet, Matt. We've got questions. Councillor Ashton's got her hand up.
Hi, Matt. I've read all the documents, specifically the land management part. That's the part I'm particularly interested in. The in conjunction test isn't straightforward, as we know. In the document, there's some sweeping sort of paragraphs that say that there's a strong history of agricultural interest and also hospitality interest by the applicant. And yet, reading through the document, I struggled to try and find those. Could you explain that a little bit more to me? Because that's somewhere where I'm struggling.
Okay. Good evening, Councillor, and thank you. I didn't articulate in detail, only to say that he has in fact managed a number of hotels right across Victoria, a number of licensed premises in other areas. He ran a very successful restaurant in the Hurstbridge area. I'll let the applicant talk to you about that. They have a wealth of experience within the hospitality industry. And of course, this is a joint land proposal, as you're all well aware, councillors. He has a wealth of experience in the agricultural industry. If you look at what he's proposing to do, clearly it's substantial agricultural use, and he's well experienced in this field as well.
I'll talk to him about that.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced it's substantial agricultural use.
Well, I'll let my client explain what's proposed to be placed on that property, council, with the greatest respect. And clearly, once you see what number of trees, both olive trees and citrus trees, are going to be planted, I'm sure you'll be satisfied that clearly it's agricultural use. And don't forget, council, with the greatest respect, we've had prior agricultural use on the land. We've had hay production, we've had cattle breeding, we've had horse agistment, we've had citrus growth on property. We've still got orange and lemon trees growing on the property. So there's an abundance of evidence to clearly show that there has been a clear and past history of other forms of agricultural use on this particular land parcel.
It wasn't in the documentation.
No, but I just made that general comment to say that there was prior agricultural use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors before I go back to Councillor Brooker? Councillor Demerit.
Thanks for your submission, Matt. Just a quick one. I'm just wondering, it's all right, the impact this is having sort of outwards, but I'm wondering, we're going to sort of see a situation where you're expecting urban amenity in a rural situation. So if someone's out spraying their orange trees on a day that, someone was wanting to have a wedding at the venue, we're going to see complaints about noise or dogs barking or, tractors going, that type of thing. How do you see that being handled?
I don't know what you're alluding to there, council, but it's not a function centre, and the planning services have certainly told us that it can't be operated as a function centre. But look, clearly the farming activity will be operating at a separate time.
No, sorry, I'm not talking about your farming activity. I'm talking about other people's farming activities.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
So it's one thing, your noise going towards other people, but it's having rural noise heading back towards a restaurant. I'm just wondering how you see that being handled.
We don't anticipate that as a problem at all. And I just repeat what I said before. If there's other noise emanating from other rural properties based on the location, the position of the farm shed, the acoustic measures that are proposed, I don't see having any effect at all.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brooker. Sorry, Councillor Perkins, your next.
Is it true to say, Matt, that all the activities, the agriculture that you talked about, none of it was of a commercial quantity? It was more a hobby farm type situation?
I disagree with that, Councillor. When you talk about hobby farming, obviously, once you start accumulating some finance from various land proposals that are being conducted on the land, I wouldn't regard it as a hobby farm. Once you start receiving finance from stuff that you grow on the land or nurture or develop or sell cattle, I'd say it's not a hobby farm, or wasn't a hobby farm. And it's certainly, once this kicks off, and I'll let my client articulate with quantities as per what the other councillor asked me, it's certainly not a hobby farm proposal, I can reassure you of that.
Right, that's okay. So what you're saying, that all the activity previously has been of a commercial character? It
to a certain extent. It's not a major commercial, we're not talking about a huge commercial property. But look, like other properties in the area, it does provide some finance for the families. It does support them in a very difficult environment. But certainly it goes beyond that hobby farm scenario, in my view.
All right. You just talked about, and you may let the applicant talk about this, or you could talk about the numbers of trees and so on, which is somewhat unspecific, I'll say that, in the report. Yeah,
well, look, I thought my farm management plan would satisfy council, but certainly there's a number of other plans, landscape plans that have been called for, and a land management plan. But look, I've got information. I'm happy to provide you. Look, we're talking about a total of 400 commercial grade olive trees, which are currently in production. So that's work in progress with a selected contractor. We've got a supply of 300 semi-advanced trees ready for scheduled planting in April 2021. There's a further 100 semi-advanced trees ready for scheduled planting in September of 2021 and March of 2022. So these trees are being prepared for olive grove. I can go on and on and on. There's 100 commercial quality citrus trees to be planted on the east side of the proposed restaurant. It just goes on and on and on. So there's certainly evidence there that, substantial agricultural use is pending. But as you're aware, councillors, in our situation, my client's not going to go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars purchasing agricultural produce if council aren't going to support the application.
Anything else, Councillor Brooker?
Yes, well, that's just somewhat at odds with the report, isn't it, Matt? The scale that you're talking about, because the figures that were in here, or if you count it up on the farm management plan, I think it was 46 olive trees and 16 lemon trees. So is that information incorrect that we're being asked to decide on?
It's not correct. They're the instructions I received at the time, but it's up to my client. He can plant as many trees as he likes, providing it's permission to do so. The point I'm alluding to, Council, is the fact that he's going, yes, I did say 46, they were the instructions I received, but he certainly wants to plant. They've looked at it now. They've had it reassessed by some land management team people, and they're telling my client that he can clearly have a lot more trees on that landscape, which is going to enhance the visual character, the appearance of the landscape significantly.
All right, I'm just making the point that is not in the application of the scale that you're talking about. But will that be in the land management plan you've the council has requested?
Yeah, absolutely. But look, just bear in mind, council, with respect, it's a commercial decision the family can make. It's up to them. They're the instructions I received at the time, but they're at liberty. If they want to plant substantial more plants, that's entirely up themselves. And that's why they're doing it, because don't forget, this is going to be pollinated into the restaurant as well as being sold at local markets and local outlets in the area. So it's a good decision. It's a commercial decision that they've made to make a decision to grow more produce on their property, which I think is a fantastic idea.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Brooker. Councillor Perkins? Nothing? Any other councillors wish to say anything? If not, thank you very much for your submission, Matt.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for letting me discuss it tonight.
Our next submitter is Jim Missilidis on behalf of D. Missilidis Proprietary Limited. So, you'd like to come into... Oh, you're there.
Good evening, councillors.
Thank you. Fire away. You've got 3 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask you some questions. Thanks, Demetrius.
Sure. Good evening, councillors. My name is Demetrius Missoulides. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my family regarding our joint proposal, Miss Louis. What a fantastic opportunity to experience boutique paddock to plate with local views, local art and breathtaking views. This joint venture has a genuine commitment to sustaining and increasing agriculture. This consists of an olive grove, a variety of citrus trees and seasonal organic produce, all to be nurtured and maintained on our 20-acre property. This produce will be filtered through the restaurant to create a boutique home-style menu for consumption. It will be made available for purchase on and off the premises and retailed within the local community. Our existing shed will be transformed to accommodate the restaurant. There will be a minimal physical impact to the land with existing infrastructure already in place. Unlike other cafe restaurants in residential areas, Miss Louis is located 200 to 250 metres away from the nearest neighbouring properties. These properties are already obscured by existing vegetation and buildings. Important to note, Miss Louis is not a bar, not a nightclub, and not a restaurant. Not a reception centre, and will not be trading 365 days a year. This application has been submitted with the support of Council Planning Services, Building Department, Economic Development Management Team, 11th of 11th, 2019, Tourism, Council Environmental Planner, Land Management Officer, Council Traffic and Transport Engineers Department, VCGLR, and Victorian Police. This is a genuine project that requires significant financial expenditure, enhancing the local area, providing additional service to community and creating local employment opportunities. Furthermore, Miss Louis will contribute to the economic growth of the Nillumbik Shire. The agriculture and restaurant are a long-term commitment which intends to succeed through generations. My wife and I are honoured to have my 2 daughters join us, displaying the passion of work ethic we pride ourselves on. It is an honest project that shares love for family, food, culture and nature. As applicants and residents who have lived on the property for more than 15 years, we cherish our environment and are committed to preserving and protecting the wildlife and flora and fauna. We have adhered to all policies and our well-balanced project meets the objectives of the Rural Conservation Zone. With stringent conditions set in place, we ensure the protection and preservation of the environment values of the area. Councillors, thank you for your time. In view of the detailed report and various council departments tonight, we seek a fair assessment in support of our joint land proposal, Miss Louis. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Demetrius. Don't disappear. I'm sure councillors will have some questions for you. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned it's a joint venture. Could you be specific as to what does that mean?
The joint venture, sorry?
Yes. Who's involved in that?
Well, it's my immediate family, and I've got my mother and father with all their wealth of experience and knowledge to support us through this project. As Matt Dillon said, there's a substantial increase of agriculture use in 2 stages, that all agriculture will be supporting the paddock to plate business model into filtering through the restaurant.
Okay, so it's, you're not bringing in outside people. It's just
no. It's all family. It's a wealth of experience.
You say one of my concerns with this was that it looks like it's a 7-day-a-week operation, but you say it's not 365 days a year. So what do you mean by that?
Well, basically, with our liquor license, we don't have choices of trading for only 5 days. So it comes as a package. So we will only be trading 5 days a week as planned. And that's basically from Wednesday to Sunday, and hours to be discussed based on those conditions.
Okay.
So
with Matt, we were touching on the, to run an agricultural venture, you know, it's a bit different having 300 citrus and 400 olive trees to having a few orange trees and a few cattle grazing. You know, you know, obviously people have to work and have that knowledge. Where are you getting that from?
Are you talking about the original submission with the 40 odd trees? Is that what you're saying?
I'm talking about if you're going to run a serious agricultural business.
Yes.
Who's going to run it? Who's going to do the work?
Well, we'll have to employ some professionals to do that at that scale. Obviously, we'll be overseeing all the work. But yeah, like I said, we originally had a proposal. Our submission was based on some information we received from our first grower, which, depending on the spacing, he recommended that we put this amount of trees per spacing. So we like to plant a little bit close together and take it to the next level. And we obviously got more than 4 acres available, 4 hectares available for our produce, and we need to sustain a little bit of land for our horses as well at the same time. So we want to make sure that we create a good balance between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors wish to ask? Councillor Brooker.
Okay. Thanks, Demetrios, for your presentation. I just want to say I've received the objections from the people surrounding your property, and I would say none of them have got an objection personally that is anything about you. They've delighted to have you as a neighbour over the years. It's strictly about the application for a restaurant. So I just wanted to say that from the outset. That said, look, I just wanted to not so much correct you, but add some clarity when you said that this had been through all the various departments of the council and had been supported by them. Typically, the way that council bureaucrats reply to these things is that they have no objection. And various departments have said, like the economic health team have said they've got no objection, building have got no objection, environmental planning would like some more details, but it's somewhat different than saying they support it. It's just that they're saying they've no objection to it. So that might be just of interest to some people who are following this process. Look, that was all. In terms of the scale up of the olive farm, is that something that you have decided to do in terms of viability, or could you maybe talk us through what prompted that change?
Look, at the end of the day, we're here to stay. We're a big part of this community. We want to stay in Yarrambat. We want to earn a living from this property. Well, we've earned every right to plant the crop that we want to live off. This is a next generation coming through. You know, I've got 2 daughters that have been supportive over the years and working with their father and getting all this knowledge, and they're in 100% into this business. You know, we want to live from this property. You know, we're part of the community. You know, we understand that residents have got their objections, but we're part of that as well. We don't want the things that they want either. Okay, we want a balance, a good balance of lifestyle and living off the land and working hard and giving back to the local community and keep the revenue in Nillumbik Shire. That's exciting for us to be able to do that as a family.
Thank you. That was well spoken. Wasn't exactly the answer to the tree question, but well spoken. Thank you. That was all.
You're welcome, Grant.
Thanks, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors have any questions?
Can I just touch on one more thing before I exit? I just want to make a note.
I'm sorry, you can't, Demetrius. We've got to follow procedure. So Councillor Rankin actually has a question.
Sorry, Karen.
Councillor Rankin has a question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question, and good submission. Thank you for taking the time. The employment numbers, you mentioned your family is going to be employed directly there. What do you see the numbers of outside employment?
We're looking around 20 to 25 employees across the board. That's not all us included either. We're obviously on a rotating schedule.
Yep.
As I said, we're looking for a good balance of lifestyle and work.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Rankin. Thanks very much, Demetrius.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our next submitter is Helen Stray. You there, Helen? Great, we've got you. Just have to unmute yourself now, Helen. That's it, we've got you.
Okay, good.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Same as the previous submitters, 3 minutes, and then councillors may have some questions for you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. The applicants are my next door neighbours. They have a vision to operate a large commercial restaurant from their rural home in a tranquil area of the Green Wedge. They're aware of the in conjunction clause in the planning scheme and have attempted to use it to get these permits approved. I don't believe they've got sound or accurate advice about the planning scheme and the overlays on their property. 29 genuine objections indicate serious concern in the neighbourhood about this proposal. I believe the application does not meet the requirements of the Rural Conservation Zone and appears to make a farce of the inconvenience. 50 of this recommendation states it is considered that having plants established in the ground would satisfy this requirement. The restaurant would be allowed to operate with no agricultural produce. The olive and lemon grove, the restaurant site, the site of additional works for 186 square metres and signage all fall within an area of significant vegetation. Being located within the ESO1 has been denied. I'm not sure why. The faunal significance described in the NEROC report has been overlooked. There's no mention of the impact on current fauna. Where will the animals move to? Melbourne Water was not consulted. The effect on waterways has not been addressed. The area designated for the olive and lemon grove is in a sensitive area and should not be approved for agriculture, according to Melbourne Water. The land capacity assessment for on-site wastewater management raised many concerns, including the soil suitability and onerous maintenance requirements. A reticulated sewage system would be required to protect the waterways and my property. The traffic report failed to address many residents' concerns and identifies trucks turning onto the wrong side of the road to exit and the required size distance not being met. The detrimental effects to the neighbourhood's amenity, it seems to be accepted. They include a loss of privacy. I do work on my land, so it's not just in my house that I need privacy. Security concerns, constant noise and light pollution, pollution from wastewater, effluent and chemicals, increased danger on our rural roads. I believe the applicants have not complied with requirements from a previous planning permit granted in 2005. How will compliance be managed for these permits? The detrimental effects of this application on the Green Wedge and local residents will be daily and ongoing. There is no end. I believe it's Council's responsibility to uphold its own regulations and to protect the Green Wedge and its occupants. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Helen. Beautifully timed. Councillors, any questions for Helen before she leaves us? Councillor Perkins.
Thanks for taking the time and effort, Helen. I'm just trying to establish how close you live to the property. All I've got is subject site and surrounds. I don't know if you've seen that in the report. And I know there are two X's immediately adjacent to the property. Are you one of those?
Yes, I live in 50 Edward Henty, which is right next door.
So that's immediately to the north?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any visitors from council? A councillor come and see you at any point?
I did, yes.
And did that councillor give any indication of how you should proceed, or what were some of the directions you received there?
I didn't receive any directions.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, did the councillor indicate to you that, you know, the officers were supportive of the application, or they were likely to refuse it?
The officer indicated that the councillors, he asked if I had seen the application and I said no, and he asked if I knew what was in it. I said no. He did suggest that it was the councillors were recommending
To grant the permit.
grant the permit. Yeah,
And that was Councillor Clark, was it?
it was.
How long ago was that?
I'm sorry. It wasn't. It was in the week prior to the meeting that the last meeting that was held.
Is there
Okay,
a reason
that's
to
2
this
weeks ago.
line of questioning?
Oh, there is. I'm just wondering, you know, what Helen was led to believe by Councillor Clark. Did he indicate to you that councillors were supportive of the application, or was it, in fact, that the officers were supportive? And did he have an officer with him?
No, there were no officers. And
Right.
it was just with regard to the report.
Okay. And was the visit unannounced, or did he make an appointment?
He telephoned when he was.
Okay.
He telephoned when he was just outside. So within about a minute, he was there.
Okay. Thanks, Helen. That's just quite unusual in my experience. I've been on council 10 years, but yeah, that's.
I just assumed he was coming to get a view of the property, so I just accepted when he rang that he was.
Oh, okay. So he didn't come onto your property.
Yes, he was on my property, but he was looking at where my property stood in relation to the site, as far as I was aware.
Okay. Okay. Interesting process, Helen. But yeah, not being involved in council, perhaps.
I'm not.
It's just.
No.
It's not usual for a councillor to attend the home of an applicant or indeed an objector, you know, without at least taking an officer with them. But
I've got no idea. Sorry.
Councillor,
Yeah, okay.
do you have a question for Helen?
No, Helen's answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Clark. You just unmuted yourself. You just muted yourself. Right. Just don't put. Try once more. Right, go.
Problem is the host's got you muted and you can't do anything about it. It's an appalling process.
Do you have any questions for Helen?
Well, but my question of Helen is, did any other councillors attend your property and seek to understand firsthand what occurs from your property?
No.
Do you think it was some value that councillors could attend your property and firsthand understand what was occurring?
I thought the reason I agreed to you coming on my property was that I thought that it would give you an understanding of the site in relation to my property.
And do you think it was, I mean, as when I was on the property, I outlined to you that the officers were recommending that a permit be granted and encouraged you to have a read of that so you would be better informed for tonight?
You did encourage me to try and get that report. It wasn't actually released, and so it couldn't be read until the Friday, was my understanding.
That's correct. So thank you very much, Mr. Strayer. It was a pleasure to meet with you and understand firsthand what was happening. Councillor Perkins could have asked all the same questions of me should he chosen over the last 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brooker.
Good evening, Helen.
Good evening.
I just am interested in some clarification from your perspective on the land management assessment as regards effluent from the site and how that how you think that might play out in terms of the management requirements of the effluent system.
I detailed that in my submission to council. It sounds like they're onerous daily, such as getting no greasy plates going into the wash, and very stringent requirements. I have grave belief that my property is going to end up severely damaged by the effluent system. It did state in that report that I would need to get an engineer to check the foundations of my buildings, and I don't know why I need to do that, because I don't think that I should have to put up with effluent from this restaurant. So I have grave fears reading that waste management plan that was done.
Any other questions, Councillor Brooker?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I mean, the point I think Helen is making is with a restaurant, there's a number of
question?
issues that need to be made.
Councillor Brooker, not a comment.
Right.
A question. Any questions? No? Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you.
I appreciate your submission. Our next submitter is Bruce Berthsel. And Bruce is here. Well done. We can see you and we can hear you, Bruce. So you've got 3 minutes like everybody else. And then councillors may wish to ask you some questions. Well done.
Right. Thanks very much. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm a new ratepayer to Nillumbik. I shifted here with my wife about 1.5 years ago from Whittlesea. We were very excited about coming to Nillumbik, as it has always been touted as a green wedge place to live. And we came from an area in Whittlesea and Wollert where we were basically forced out of our farm. We couldn't farm there anymore because of the encroachment of things like residential area, but more importantly, things like restaurants that came into the area and then had a huge detrimental effect on the way we could farm our property. So we were quite excited about coming to Nillumbik and coming to a green wedge area. And then to see that this has come up was a bit of a concern for us, because we're concerned about the amenity and we're concerned about how this would change our view of what is happening in Nillumbik. It's a real shame. As we were farmers on our property, it's going to take a hell of a lot of work to try and make a living off 20 acres. And if they can make a living off 20 acres, I don't know why you need a restaurant. We can't work that one out. But it seems to me that we're getting caught up with the farming aspect of it, which really seems to be an adjunct to be able to get the restaurant. But that's my point of view. That's an opinion that I have. It's not based on any fact. I have concerns about the effect that the amenity will have on our area. I live at the bottom of Edward Henty Avenue. And if you know that area there, it's a dead-end road, and we often get people coming down there and doing burnouts, dumping rubbish, all that sort of thing, bringing more people into the area when it's meant to be a green wedge area and a farming area, and taking away that and creating a different amenity. We have great concerns about what it will do at the end of our road. It's a bit of a concern for us. It's something that we would not be looking forward to. And that hasn't been answered at all, I don't think, and hasn't been discussed about how this is going to be dealt with, all the extra traffic that's going to come into the area, because it's the big push is it's the restaurant. It's not a business for agriculture. I know how hard it is to make a living off 140 acres that we had at Wollert, let alone 20 acres. You have to do an incredible amount of work to be able to make a living off that. So it's just an adjunct, and the real money-making concern is the restaurant. That's fine, got no problems with that as long as it's in an appropriate area. I think maybe you could farm in one area and take your produce to another area and then do development there, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And it's a shame. I just wanted to be involved because I wanted to be part of this as a new resident, let people know that it does make a difference when these sort of things happen when it comes to the area. It happened to us, we had to get out, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen here and it changes the amenity of what we have now. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, where are you at, Bruce? Where's your property?
We're down at the bottom of Edward Henty, 150.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't have scored a visit from the chair of planning, unaccompanied.
Sorry?
Did Councillor Clark attend your premises as well, or he was a bit far away?
No, the whole process has been quite amazing. We haven't had anybody. We haven't had the people who are putting up this proposal approach us. Would you think that if we're living on that road that they might try and come and talk to us and put their point of view without coming to this sort of thing? No, we have no council officers at all come to us. Not one council officer who's saying they have no objections to this came to us, and definitely no councillors.
Right.
I sent my submission to all the councillors. I had 2 replies and nobody else replied.
Yep.
Any questions, Councillor Perkins?
No, that's the extent of my question.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Brooker?
This may help us, Bruce. You said you farmed 140 acres near Wollert. What have you got any experience in olive farming, or was any of your farming about olives?
No, we were a cattle stud.
Okay. All right. Then I have no further questions. I was hoping you might be able to answer some questions about olives. But
Councillor Ashton.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. So you're new to the area. How many acres have you got now, Bruce?
We're on 20 acres.
20 acres. And
Downside.
when you're in Wollert, do you know what zoning you were in there?
So what farming were we doing?
No, what zone you were in?
Oh, we were zone general farming. Then there was a precinct structure plan change.
Were you part of the growth corridor there?
Not initially, no, we weren't. But then when there was a whole lot of changes around us, and then council then forced us into going into it.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I know there are issues in that area. Thank you for that, Bruce. Thank you.
Any other questions from any other councillors for Bruce? If not, thank you very much for your submission, Bruce.
Thanks very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Our next submitters are Jenny and Dennis Gregory Brown. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
Fire away, the same as everybody else, 3 minutes, and then you may be asked questions.
Thank you. We're grateful for the opportunity to post this application one property away. The application lacks details, in parts is contradictory, makes statements that have no factual basis or justification against the planning scheme. In last week's council meeting, Mayor Egan argued for residents of Chapel Lane, stating this is where they live. This isn't a commercial enterprise. For them, you're destroying the amenity of a simple country lane. The same applies to the neighbouring residents of this proposed restaurant. We will have our amenity destroyed forever. On professional advice, we strongly believe the application is prohibited by clause 51.02 that is designed to protect the green wedge. The impact of this scale of urban use and development will not protect the significant values of the metropolitan green wedge land, and the proposed use and development should be in an urban zone. The use of the land for a restaurant is conditioned on being in conjunction with a range of activities, including agriculture. It is considered that this use is prohibited based on the application's information and further consideration and assessment of the provisions contained in clause 51.02 and 64.02. That there must be a genuine, close and continuing functional relationship in its operation with the other use, in this case, agriculture. The proposed small-scale planting of lemon trees, olives and herbs that are yet to be planted will not be viable, if at all, for many years. The restaurant does not need any of these to operate, and they are not an essential requirement for any restaurant. Noise pollution will be increased dramatically due to the shape of the valley and the location of the restaurant. The noise generated from 150 patrons, potentially 3 times a day, would adversely impact our amenity. Traffic to and from, including deliveries, would be extremely disturbing. The property seeking the permit has a dog that barked excessively. We could hear it clearly from inside our house, as could neighbours in Charles Sturt Drive, which demonstrates how far noise travels. The introduction of a commercial use into an environmentally sensitive area would have significant impact on the flora and fauna, with increased vehicle movement, human activity, noise and light intrusions, but this was not addressed in the application. We have great concerns for a pair of endangered wedge-tailed eagles that have their eyrie in Edward Henty Avenue. Has the application been referred to the Commonwealth for consideration of the impact on their habitat? Whilst it is noted that a land capability assessment indicates the size the land is capable of treating on-site wastewater, it provided limited assessment of the cumulative impact of several wastewater systems on the native flora and fauna of the area. The access to this proposed restaurant is highly dangerous due to the two intersections zoned both in 80 kilometres and 100 kilometre zones. There is only one street light, making the roads and intersections in the area even more dangerous at night. There are no footpaths in the surrounding areas. The closest bus service is 1.4 kilometres away. In summary, a planning permit for this restaurant should not be granted as it does not meet the in conjunction with agriculture clause and should be assessed in conjunction with clause 64. Thank you, councillors, for your time.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Can I just ask where you are? And the other thing, before councillors ask you other questions, apparently there's an omission on our map tonight and in the agenda where all the X's are for the objectors. And I'm not sure whether that's you, but there is an X missing from our map. So do you front Bannon's Lane or are you in Edward Henty?
Bannon's Lane.
So you literally next door, 101
property away. So there would be one property to the east. So we're on Bannon's Lane itself.
Right.
Lydia and Joe are the next door neighbours, and then we're one property away.
Right, so you're the X that's on the map, so we're still missing somebody else. So I'm sure we'll come to.
We're 125 Bannon's Lane.
Right, okay.
That helps, Karen.
Yep. All right, councillors, over to you. Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I'm just trying to determine the extent of Councillor Clark's door knocking. Were you paid a visit by a tall man in a Mercedes-Benz?
No, but to the best of my knowledge, he visited 2 properties.
Oh, okay. Do you know who they were?
To the best of my knowledge, he visited Helen Stray, who was spoken to, and then our next door neighbours, Lydia and Joe.
And the applicant, you would imagine?
I have no idea.
No, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jenny? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Jenny. Drove past your property, but no, I didn't stop.
It's a beautiful property.
It is. Just so it'll save Councillor Perkins wasting more time, the 2 abutting submitters were the only ones that I met with. I've not spoken or met with the applicant. Might save him a bit of time. Mind you, he could have saved everybody time had he asked me the question over the last 2 weeks, but seems like we're about grandstanding tonight. My question to Jenny, and as much as anything else, before I asked any question, the question to the officers, in particular the Director of Planning. Jenny made the comment that clause 5102 prohibited the use and for the application proceeding. Wonder whether Director of Planning might just comment on the accuracy of that commentary.
Just one moment, Councillor Clark. Okay, we can hear you, Rosa, if you'd like to. There you go, great. Did you hear Councillor Clark's question?
So, as I understand it, the question is whether clause 5102 allows the use on the land?
Correct.
So, clause 52 requires that the proposed agricultural use on the site must have an essential and close functioning relationship with the other use. but it is certainly not prohibited.
Anything else, Councillor Clark?
No,
That's it. Councillor Demerit. I presume you wanted to ask Rosa a question.
No, my question is to you, Mayor. Are we going to have the situation where councillors are going to interrogate statements made by submitters? It has been in the past, submitters have been allowed to talk. You can ask them questions directly, but not try and tear apart what they're saying.
I think Councillor Clark was just clarifying with the staff member. I don't think that was tearing apart at all. I would have asked the same question.
Can I say something on that?
Certainly, Jenny.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Clark there too, I would like to say from the application that we were given that it is clearly not in conjunction and it is not something that would need to be in conjunction with the agriculture and the restaurant.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from any other councillors? Councillor Brooker.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you. How you mentioned there were some wedge-tailed eagles at the base of your property. How many pairs are left in the wild, Jenny?
According to the reports I've read, 200 are left in the wild, so they're highly endangered. And our wedge-tailed eagles have had 2 lots of babies.
Right, okay. So is it your concern that the amenity issues that are created by traffic and I guess associated activities would compromise the nesting activities of these eagles? Is that it?
Of course. And then there's the danger of extra traffic, extra light, extra noise, etc., etc. And obviously the wedge-tailed eagles are of great concern because they are highly endangered, but there are numerous wildlife around here. Kangaroos, wombats, possums, echidnas, that would all be endangered by this.
Okay. Thank you. But the wedge-tailed eagles are the ones where there's less than 200.
And wedge-tailed eagles don't like humans. Like if we are out on the property, they won't land. If we are away from the property or like there's a distance, they will land on our property and feed.
Thank you.
And they've been in all the areas.
Councillor Perkins, you have a question? No? All right. Thank you very much, Jenny.
Thank you.
Do now. Sorry, Jenny. He's changed his mind.
Well, I hadn't changed my mind. I just haven't got a trigger finger, to get to that mute button quick enough because we have no control over the mute button anymore. Jenny, I was going to ask you, your concern, aside from this development, is it more broadly about the in conjunction test and the way this council seems to be interpreting it in terms of a precedent into, all of
I would hate to
the green wedge?
That this would be a precedent for the green wedge zone. Yes, absolutely, because it would mean that it would be far easier to set up other business developments like this. We fought hard not to have our area subdivided. It's a very special and very unique part of Yarrambat, of Melbourne, because it is the green wedge. We are nearly everyone here is on 20 acres. We all came here for the peace and tranquility. It's the breathing, the lungs of Melbourne.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? If not, thanks very much, Jenny.
Thank you very much.
Our next submitter is Fiona Lennox. And Fiona's already there. And we can see your car, but not yourself.
Oh, okay. Start my video. Yes, that's it.
All right.
Oh, I'm so sorry about the background.
That's all right.
Okay, I'll start now.
Fine. You've got 3 minutes like everybody else and then questions maybe.
Thank you, councillors. My husband and 2 adult children who live with us at our home at 85 Charles Sturt Drive are obviously very concerned about the proposed development of a restaurant at 103 Bannons Lane. I certainly can't call the proposal a genuine use of land for agricultural development, as even the applicant's own proposal mentions the restaurant's detailed plans first and offers very little in terms of realistic plans for agricultural use. A good example of this is in their business plan, where the restaurant building is completed in the first year before even planting the first plant. It is not until the 2nd to the 4th year that the olive trees and lemon trees are even planted. Olives take between 7 to 8 years to fruit. How much homework has the applicant really done on the agricultural side, or is this just a farce, a convenient loophole to open a large restaurant? The proposed site is in an area, as per the applicant's own description, which is used for cattle grazing and horse adjustment, and in itself rural in nature. That's their words. As we have said in our objection letter, our main concerns are noise pollution, privacy, security, and the damage it will have on our rural environment and lifestyle. Our home is positioned not far down the valley and is in direct view of the proposed outside dining area. To have to hear the restaurant patrons and associated noises every day, 7 days a week is unimaginable. The restaurant and the noise level 150 people eating and drinking would create would of course be much higher than acceptable levels, even without the music being played outside. Even if the proposal was modified to lunch and dinner only without music being played, it's still unacceptable. On occasion, when the local families in the area have parties, noise is very noticeable and bellows out across the valley. Of course, this is fine, as it doesn't happen very often. The position of the restaurant overlooks homes, farm animals, equipment sheds that not only we have, but also all our neighbours. What is naturally screened from the public's eye will now be on display to 300 people per day. This raises huge security and privacy issues for us all. We also are incredibly concerned about the possible wastewater running off down the slope of the valley from the restaurant and into our dams. As we all know from past experience, once a commercial development opens, they can then ask for permission to expand hours, music limits, even the size of the development. We fear the applicants really wants a venue which not only operates as a restaurant, but also used for weddings, 21st and other such noisy functions. Their first step is getting you to agree with the proposal, even with modifications outlined by your officers. 13 years ago, we deliberately chose to live in this rural area with a number of overlays and planning zones, which we thought would protect us from commercial ventures such as this. With this in mind, we ask you to reject the proposed restaurant.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Councillors, questions, please? No, thanks very much, Fiona.
Thank you.
The next submitter is David Butner. Can you hear us, David? You need to unmute yourself. David, if you can hear me, you need to unmute yourself. We're having some technical problems with David. I think he's on a phone and that's part of the problem. We'll try and sort out Greg's issues, and in the meantime we'll go, oh, here we are, we've got Greg now. We've got Greg Timer now, but we'll talk to David Butner offline and see if we can sort his issues out. So Greg, you've got 3 minutes.
Am I online yet?
We can hear you, we just can't see you yet. If you could just push your video button.
Okay, hang on.
Fabulous, now we can see you and hear you.
I just can't see myself, so that's good. Oh no, there I am. Yes, good evening. I did prepare a statement to read, but as I've listened to so many people, I don't want to repeat everything that other people have said. I guess my wife and I object strenuously to this application on a couple of very important issues. One is the protection of our rural conservation zone. The Latrobe Downs, where we live, is a rural conservation zone. It is a green wedge. And on that association alone, this application should just not be permitted. It does seem to us that this planning application, with the suggestion that there'll be some sort of ongoing agricultural production, even if the plants do survive, is false and seeks to manipulate the rural conservation zone heritage. We object to this adverse environmental impact. It'll be widespread, it'll be noise, it'll be lighting, it'll be the impact of preparing the car parking areas, the waste disposal areas, all the modifications that's going to be going on around the area. It's just not consistent with a rural conservation zone. We do respect these conservation values, and there's no reference in this proposal to the wildlife corridor. But there is reference in the farm management plan to maintaining fences to the exclusion of wombats, kangaroos, deer and other pest species, and the legal daily eradication of foxes, rabbits, mice, and in some cases, deer and kangaroos. Like, was this proposal downloaded by Google and from Google and just sort of adapted to the applicant's conditions? Don't know. Noise is a great concern for us. We hear neighbourhood traffic and noise now. You know, we're in an open space. The applicant's property is on one of the highest hills in the Latrobe Downs. There are no natural impediments to prevent noise from transmitting. And a permit is supposedly going to be allowed based on a noise study, but that noise study won't prevent inconsiderate patrons and inappropriate activities. The eastern facing outdoor area will directly impact on the amenity of our neighbours from a privacy and a noise perspective. Waste is a concern. We've got a dam. Our dam feeds our animals. Our dam waters our vegetable garden, and a dam does our gardening around the house. So we've got great concerns. In summary, the application, I believe, is flawed and needs to be thrown out.
Thanks very much.
And just go back to basics, rural conservation zone.
Over to you, councillors. Any questions for Greg? Councillor Brooker.
Wildlife corridors, Greg, you've mentioned. Can you maybe elaborate a little on that, where specifically you believe they're occurring?
Yeah, sure. Particularly the kangaroos, they love the habitat of the gum trees, the scrub. And if you look at the map, you'll see that there's a particular line of scrub gum trees coming all the way up Headwood Henty, which then crosses over into Bannon's Lane and goes further to the south. There's a similar corridor to the west of our to the east of our property, and we've been living here for sort of 35 odd years, and we just know where the kangaroos come from. They come out of that scrub every day, and I think that corridor is an important corridor, and it does end. The applicant's property does run right into that vegetation. And as Jenny said before, we do have the kangaroos, the wombats, the echidnas, the possums, and yes, there are 4 wedge-tailed eagles flying around on a regular basis.
Greg, can I just ask which property you are on our map?
Sure.
Like Bannon's Lane or Edward Henty?
We're on Bannon's Lane and Charles Sturt Drive on the corner. So we're
next to Jenny.
Next to Jenny, we're 3 properties away from the applicant, but to the east. Our property is behind their restaurant, but that doesn't stop us. That doesn't stop us hearing their dogs barking.
Right, thank you. Any other questions from any other councillors? If not, thank you very much, Greg.
Pleasure, thank you.
Have we got David back online, Balaga, or are we moving on to Dean? No, we're up to Dean. Welcome, Dean. If you can unmute yourself, and great, we can hear you now. Just start your video. Fantastic, we've got you.
Fantastic, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're already ready to go ahead.
Yep, 3 minutes, and then councillors may ask you a question. Okay,
great. Well, good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and fellow councillors and CEO. I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Tatalia at 105 to 123 Bannons Lane. That's the property that was omitted in the actual annexed plans that showed the objectives.
So that's right next door, just to clarify before you go on. Yeah,
absolutely, okay. Right next door to the proponent's okay. Subject site. I'll just continue. So let me go ahead. Struggle with the 3 minutes as well. So over and above the plethora of statutory support to reject the application, I draw on your attention to a couple of key considerations. The officer's report indicates on page 27 that the proponents have demonstrated that all wastewater can be treated on site. Page 8 of the consultant's report makes estimates averaged out at 5 days of trading, not 7. Further to this, the land capability does not consider more than 300 patrons per day, as may be the case on Sundays with trading commencing from 8 a.m. My clients have real and valid concerns regarding excessive effluent, nutrient loads and potential runoff onto their property and into the stock dam. Additionally, we have ongoing concerns regarding noise pollution, as have others, and put forward that the request for an acoustic report does not extend far enough and should include assessments of loud and intoxicated patrons on the annex entering and leaving the premises, and indeed perhaps patrons wandering throughout the site, including the olive groves, which are in close proximity. Next, and most importantly, is the proposed approval of the restaurant, which we argue does not have a genuine or ongoing association with agricultural use. It is difficult to believe that, and I think the goalposts have moved this evening, but we're going off what the officer's report suggests, which is 62 olive trees and 16 lemons, satisfies the in conjunction with requirement of clause 5102, which I think Jenny was referring to earlier, and clauses 6402 for a business venture operating at 365 days a year from 12 midday till 10 p.m, 6 days a week, and from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. on Sundays, which would best and fairly be described, in my opinion, as commercial in nature. Furthermore, the Berthsel report 1997 has identified high value flora and fauna in this area and fauna of state significance. The proposal for agricultural and restaurant are not as of right under the provisions of the zone and are indeed Section 2 uses, which must provide acceptable planning outcomes for the whole community. Although employment and tourism are important, they must not be to the detriment of the environment or the existing community amenity. Ultimately, we have a responsibility as custodians of the land and decision makers to protect the environment, particularly in a rural conservation zone with highly valued and important flora and fauna attributes, and to ensure the residents' existing amenities protected, and to focus development supporting tourism and employment into appropriately zoned areas and not into potentially creating a land use conflict with surrounding land uses. In my professional opinion, in its current form, this application does not meet the decision guidelines within the zone, does not meet the environmental objectives within the overlay, does not satisfy the in conjunction with clause within the green wedge zone, and more broadly the MSS and decision guidelines.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify something with our governance officer, because you're speaking on behalf of somebody. I don't think we can ask you questions. Is that correct, Margaret?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks very much, Stan, for your submission.
Thank you.
We now go to Carolyn Dyer. Or are we back with David?
Sorry, through the chair, we do have David back on, if you mind.
All right, see if he can unmute himself this time. Councillor Demery?
I was just wondering, should we have been asking questions of Matt Dillon in that case?
Yes, and nobody put their hands up.
Sorry.
No.
Through the,
oh, no, he was there.
Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah.
He's the applicant.
Yeah.
So
of the application.
The applicant for the, on behalf of. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so back to David. Can you hear me, David? Can you unmute yourself this time? No, he's still having trouble, I'm afraid. We'll move to our next speaker, Carolyn Dyer. Welcome, Carolyn. If you can, yes, you're unmuted, and if you could click on your, great, we've got you. You've got 3 minutes, fire away.
Thank you for allowing me to speak at tonight's meeting. My name is Carolyn Dyer and I've been a resident of Yarrambat for over 20 years. I'm disappointed that the officer is recommending that this permit is granted for all of the reasons I have outlined in my original objection. I believe that this permit does not fall within the regulations of the Green Wedge and that the officer's interpretation of the essential relationship between the agriculture and restaurant is not made in the spirit for which this section of the Act was written. As outlined in my objection, a vineyard and cellar door is a good example of an essential relationship for the purpose of this section and to showcase any produce. How can a restaurant catering for 150 people serving alcohol, opening every single day of the year until 10 p.m, be an essential relationship with the proposed agriculture? The large commercial business venture is disproportionate to the minor nature of the agriculture. The officer acknowledges that the site functioning as a restaurant will be noticeable to the surrounding properties with additional traffic, lighting, noise, and believes a closing time of midnight to be excessive. However, notwithstanding the 29 individual residents who reside in the surrounding properties who have all objected to this application and the officer's acknowledgement that it will cause disruption and a loss to our amenities, he has deemed it insufficient or irrelevant to recommend denying this planning permit. To say I'm disappointed would be an understatement. If you allow this application, what level of assurance will the council provide to ensure that all legal requirements are carried through? Your planning permit from 2005 stipulated the conversion of an existing dwelling into an uninhabitable outbuilding. The applicant has not shown good faith and converted the dwelling, nor has the council taken satisfactory action over the last 15 years to ensure that the works were performed in accordance with that permit. I purchased this property in 2000 on the understanding that I was purchasing in the Green Wedge and that development of a business nature would be restricted. Up until now, I would never have believed that a restaurant of this type would be considered in this immediate area, and I'm disillusioned by the fact the officer has not denied this application before this stage. It is disappointing what detailed and timely lengths the local residents have had to go to in an attempt to ensure the laws for which the officer is bound to are actually upheld. If this permit is approved by council, then I do not believe the councillors are representative of the constituents for which you are supposed to represent. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. Any questions from councillors? If not, thank you very much. Sorry, we've got Councillor Brooker coming in at the last minute.
Brian, just can you tell me whereabouts is your property in relation to the applicant?
I'm on Bannon's Lane and I'm about halfway between Edward Henty Drive and Yan Yan Road.
Okay.
So you're what? You're the tiny, you're the small block?
Yes, a third of an acre, yep.
Right.
Right, okay, thank you.
I'm in between the public transport and the restaurant, so any public transport walkers would be walking directly past my property.
Yes, well, would you like to make a comment on public transport, which was in the application?
Well, I think it's inadequate and the application alludes to the fact that there is good public transport. That is clearly not the case. I think public transport ceases at 9 p.m. is the last bus. So it doesn't even meet closing time.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Our last Zoom person is Ross Steele. Are you in the room, Ross? Oh, we're going to try again with David. So hopefully we've got you this time. If you can unmute your phone. I'm sorry, David, unless you can unmute your phone, we can't hear your submission. I'm afraid we'll have to go on to our last Zoom submitter, which is Ross Steele. Right, we can hear you, and if you can just make yourself visible, you have. Thanks, Ross. Fire away. You've got 3 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask you a question.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, councillors, for the opportunity to speak. I feel that speaking tonight that what I had prepared, I'd be going over a lot of the other points that have been raised previously, and I'm sure that you've certainly got the message loud and clear from the other presentations. My wife and myself have lived at 65 Laurie Street for 40 years, or around 40 years, just short of 40 years actually. We value the zone rural conservation, and we also value being part of the Green Wedge. We strongly object to the repurposing of the tin shed, originally built as a tradesman's carpet storage warehouse at 103 Bannon's Lane, which in fact is off Edward Henty, into a commercial 150-seat restaurant. The application has been made, as everybody else has said, under the guise of this is permitted use in conjunction with agriculture. At this time, there's no agriculture. It appears to us that the intent of the council's statutory planning to allow a cafe in conjunction was intended for vineyards, etc., to establish a small facility to support their cellar door or produce sales. The applicant has never, to the best of our knowledge, commercially grown anything on his land except weeds, and they wouldn't be commercially grown. The applicant's proposal to repurpose this shed into a commercial 150 seat restaurant to operate 11 to 12 hours per day, 7 days a week. This restaurant will seriously affect the amenity of our area, wildlife, pollution. It'll provide increased traffic. The traffic management plan basically makes no comment about the access from Laurie Street onto Edward Henty. The property is located just to the east of Laurie Street. Laurie Street's a very narrow road, exceptionally steep, spray-coated road, and is so narrow 2 cars can't pass without moving on the grass verge. Pollution will be a major problem. Smells, effluent seems to be, and these points seem to be skirted over. Okay, so that's...
Thanks very much, Ross. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Ross. I wondered, we've talked about similar types of properties, if you would have a comment on Yarrambat Estate, which is in Laurie Avenue as well, I think.
That's right, it's above us, and when the applicant put in a proposal to operate that area as a vineyard with a restaurant, we objected to the restaurant part of it, but then that was watered down, where that restaurant would only be open for a small number of days a year in grape grazing season, and that was really how it was shaped. Now that works reasonably well, to be very honest. Yeah, we do hear a bit of noise from up there when they have singers and other entertainment. That entertainment is indoors, and we hear it quite clearly from our place down the valley. However, it's during the day, and it doesn't affect anything. The only exception to that was one wedding that was held there very early in the piece, and that was stopped by the council at the time, and there were no more weddings. So, you know, got no objection now. It does operate quite well, and the owner of that property, I think, values the area as much as we do. Sorry, you meant to ask.
Would I be right in saying that operates for 6 days per year or 6 Sundays per year?
That's 6. Well, no, it could be a Saturday or a Sunday, actually.
Okay, but a maximum of 6.
Yes, maximum of
Okay,
6.
Thank you.
And that's really what I think the intent was, that the restaurant or cafe operate in conjunction with a commercial, operate in conjunction with an agricultural venture.
Councillor Ashton.
Hi Ross, thank you for your pleasure. I think we've been in email contact as well.
Yeah.
Your main concern with, well, one of the concerns was about the traffic on Laurie Street, and you felt that the officers hadn't addressed that sufficiently in their traffic assessment report. Is that correct?
Hasn't been addressed at all.
At all.
And apart from where they talked about the traffic flow, and that showed an increase between 8 and 9 or 8 and 10 in the morning, where the traffic turns left off Yanyan Road, comes up over Laurie Street and takes a shortcut down to Hurstbridge or Diamond Creek. And if you look at the traffic report, you'll see that the number of vehicles actually increased dramatically during that 2 hours. But really, Laurie Street is very, very narrow, and really, it's an accident waiting to happen. You put more traffic on there, and there'll be an accident there.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. We're now going to hand over, unless we're going to try one more time and get David back. I think he's given up, has he? Yeah, we can't get through to him. Councillor Brooker.
Yeah, I've just heard from one of the applicants who said he has problems, being on mute, and they asked if either the CEO or the objector could read his submission. So,
well, Carl's about to start reading the submissions now. So in the meantime, if we can get a copy of that, I'm sure other councillors won't mind.
Thank you. So if they send that submission to me, possibly I could send it to Carl.
Unless Carl's he's got it already. No, he hasn't got it already. He's shaking his head. Yep, go for it, Grant.
Okay, thank you.
Over to you, Carl.
I'm unmuted. Good.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and members of the virtual gallery. This submission is from George and Gwendolyn Barrett, and they write as follows. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to this meeting. Our aim is to remind you of our submitted objections and to provide a few additional comments. We have lived in Laurie Street for almost 50 years. We are very familiar with the area and particularly with the site of this application. These are our objections. The proposed development is entirely out of character with surrounding countryside. We are not aware of any equivalent business anywhere in the Nillumbik Green Wedge. The proposed development does not meet the Green Wedge requirement of must be used in conjunction with agriculture. There is no agriculture currently at the property, and we can categorically state that no agriculture has been carried out there at any time during the past 50 years. The proposed development would seriously jeopardize the biodiversity of this region. In their application, the applicants have described in detail how they will eradicate indigenous wildlife. The proposed development would create major noise pollution for our home and most surrounding areas. The applicants have provided no acoustic report by a qualified acoustic consultant. The proposed development would create serious traffic hazards for the residents of Laurie Street and for travellers using this dangerous road to reach the property. All GPS roadmap apps direct a significant portion of potential clients to access via Laurie Street. The proposed development would impose unreasonable hours of endurance on local residents. Potential operation could be as late as 11 p.m. 363 days per year. The site for the proposed development includes land of Aboriginal cultural heritage sensitivity. There is no reference to this fact in all the documentation provided by the applicants. Finally, and most significantly, we believe that 3 captioned photographs in the documentation submitted to Council are extremely misleading and are a misrepresentation on the part of the applicant's hired professional consultancy. The misleading photographs also indicate, at the very least, extreme carelessness on the part of the applicants. We firmly believe that this planning application should be refused. Please do not let it happen. And that is the submission. The next submission is from Glenda and Mary Waldy, and they write as follows. We would like to reiterate our objections and concerns on this proposal from a previous email. We have resided at 10 Laurie Street, Yarrambat, for more than 30 years and would describe the area as semi-rural with a quiet ambience, home to an abundance of native wildlife and flora and fauna to native plant species. This area would be severely compromised by the approval of this licensed establishment. Objection under the category detrimental to the amenity of the area. To name a couple, they are itemized as such. 1, endangerment to native wildlife, and 2, noise disturbance. Endangerment to native wildlife. With the approval of this licensed establishment, there is a highly increased endangerment to our community's predominant eastern grey kangaroos. According to Wildlife Victoria, this type of species is the #1 victim of collided vehicle trauma. With increased urbanisation, kangaroos are forced into smaller pockets of land to graze. There has also been frequent sightings of echidnas in the proposed location of the licensed premises. Stated by Bush Heritage, the primary threat to slow-moving echidnas is habitat loss and the vulnerability of being hit by a vehicle. This venue will increase a high volume of traffic flow. The concern for the effluent not contained will also affect the grazing of our native species. Deer have also recently been sighted on Bannon's Lane during later hours of the night that run unexpectedly in front of cars, which could have severe outcomes. Noise disturbance. The placement of this venue is in a tranquil and peaceful environment. The community is predominantly inhabited by seniors who have resided here in hopes of a quiet, enjoyable setting. We feel our amenity will be lost and is an invasion of privacy. Majority of residents in the Edward Henty, Laurie Street and Bannon's Lane have all lived here for numerous years. The location of the proposal is on a high point of Yarrambat, meaning the intrusive noise pollution will radiate throughout the neighbourhood. This will severely impact the well-being of our elderly community, which could cause health issues due to disturbed routine sleep with constant noise. The cafe restaurant proposal with a license to serve and possibly sell liquor from the hours of 8 AM till possibly 2 AM every day of the year, with the exception of Christmas Day only. This proposal is extremely excessive and insulting to our community. This is an intrusion on the amenity of our area. They also propose to have a venue with a capacity to hold 140 persons or more, which is extremely excessive for this semi-rural neighbourhood.
Thanks, Carl. That's 3 minutes.
That wasn't quite the end, but that's the submission. The final submission I have to read out is from Greg Johnson on behalf of the Friends of Nillumbik. There was another submission, but my printer is out of ink, so Blaga is going to read that for us shortly. Greg's submission on behalf of the Friends of Nillumbik is as follows. Friends of Nillumbik objects to this restaurant proposal in Bannon's Lane because it is not consistent with the intent of the zone or the long-term protection of our green wedge. It will also have a negative impact on local amenity. The critical functional nexus between the restaurant use and the agricultural use, as required by the scheme, is speculative and not at all guaranteed in this application. The proposed Section 173 agreement seeks to paper over this uncertainty with a legal device which also lacks any guarantee. Who monitors the agreement? neighbours? Will a future council choose to annul the agreement? Time will tell whether the yet to exist small olive plantation proves to be a temporary device for gaining a permit for a prohibited use, i.e. the restaurant. The proposed conditions listed in the officer's report are persuasive that this is a development which is not suitable for a quiet rural area. It's an urban use for a rural area. Councillors' preference for more economic development in our rural area must not subvert planning scheme provisions which sustain the environmental qualities of the Green Wedge. Nearby residents also have a right to continue to enjoy the amenity which made Yarrambat an attractive place to live. Thank you. And that is Greg's submission.
And now we have Blaga, who's going to read Judy Rodstead Woods, and she's also going to read David Butner's, who we couldn't get through. He couldn't get through on the phone.
Thank you, Mayor Egan. So this submission is on behalf of Judy Rodstead Wood. I don't believe that this application should be approved, as it adversely affects the area and will cause unacceptable impact to the surrounding residences. I choose to live in a rural location, not next to or near a commercial business, operating 7 days a week and certainly not a 150-seater restaurant. Councillors should be supporting the ideology of the Green Wedge and the residents who reside there, and not allow such an inappropriate development. In my opinion, this was one of the main platforms the councillors were voted in on. They should not compromise their judgment, particularly as the council references strong in its vision statement to preserving the Green Wedge. Yet the council is considering allowing a 150-seater restaurant at 103 Bannons Lane, Yarrambat, with the actual structure being on a hilltop on Edward Henty Avenue, where sound and noise pollution from patrons and their vehicles will be magnified across the valley. This will cause a continued disturbance due to the very long hours of the operation, location, number of patrons using this restaurant, and increased usage of the adjoining roads. The land in question is in the Green Wedge, in a rural location, and has an environmental overlay, ES01, and is in the Rural Conservation Zone. The property doesn't have established orchards, and it is concerning that the application is being considered in conjunction with the agriculture usage, which also isn't properly stipulated. The application doesn't express any sincere intent to operate this agriculture use beyond the means of getting the restaurant application approved. The herb garden is tokenistic and not of viable size to maintain an ample supply of herbs to the restaurant. Due to this, merely planting some fruit trees allows the restaurant to operate even though they aren't established. Using the produce in the restaurant from olive and lemon trees won't occur till the trees are established over a period of a number of years. Yet this is considered to be a viable means to apply for this permit. The application doesn't demonstrate how the proposed agriculture use will be viable and how it is integral to the proposed operation of the restaurant. Cyclists, horse riders and pedestrians safely will be affected. The wildlife in this area, particularly the kangaroos, echidnas and wombats, which live in this area and roam at night, will be affected by the proposed development. Lots of motorists use Laurie Street as a shortcut already, and traffic in Edward Henty Avenue, Laurie Street and Bannons Lane will increase tenfold. It sets a precedent. Would the councillors like to suddenly find that they are going to be possibly living next to or near a 150-seater restaurant? This will totally change and degrade the ambience. And
sorry, Blaga, time. Have you got the final one from David?
I do.
All right.
Just one moment. So this is on behalf of David. I would like to thank the chairperson and the committee for the opportunity to talk with you this evening re the subject application. My name is David Butner. My wife Helen and I reside down the valley in a northeasterly direction from the subject property. Today, in the time available, I would like to focus on two specific issues. Firstly, the process undertaken to arrive at the recommendation, and secondly, to briefly raise two critical issues that seem somewhat confusing and anomalous by nature. The matter of process is that which has resulted in the recommendation that the committee issue a notice of decision to grant a permit. The recommendation then details numerous conditions that must be met before the development and use can commence. It is the process that led to the recommendation that I seek to better understand. The fact that so many amended or additional commitments have to be met is surely testament to the fact that the application was inadequate in the first instance. The application was short on detail in many areas and contradictory in many others. Given this, why and how can such a recommendation be made? For such applications, it would be reasonable to assume that, firstly, there is a checklist of requirements that must be met to ensure a high quality application, one that can be duly reviewed and considered by each responsible authority. And secondly, that the specifics pertaining to the application would be discussed at the on-site meetings between the applicant and the council representatives. To issue a notice of decision to grant a permit without the required conditions being met seems somewhat incongruous. It appears that the process is retrospective. It may well appear as the council saying to the applicant, we'll grant the permit and worry about the detail later. A couple of examples of this leads me to my second point. While there are many issues requiring further clarification, there are two critical issues which I suggest require clear guidance from council. The first issue relates to the agricultural use of the land. On page 429, it states that the restaurant use approved must not commence until such time as the agricultural use is established in accordance with the approved farm plan. I note council has requested an amended farm management plan. On page 450, there is a reference to the agricultural use being implemented. It states that it is considered that having plants established in the ground would satisfy this requirement. The key question begged here is, what does the word established mean in this context? Does it mean planted, grown to a certain height, bearing fruit for the use of restaurant and so on? Is it an issue where absolute clarity is required? The second issue I wish to raise is that of waste management, water management. The issue here relates to item 39 on page 438, and I paraphrase, is the existing septic system proves ineffective, it must be replaced. Again, this appears to be a retrospective activity. The critical question here is, after commencement...
Sorry, Black. We've got some interference there, I think. Thank you for that. That brings an end to our submitters. So we now go back to our agenda and the officer's report. And a mover for the motion, I think we've got Councillor Brooker.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Look, before we get to that, I don't know if it was listed on the or through governance as one of the speakers tonight, but I got a submission from Dennis Brown that hasn't been read out. I've just forwarded it on to the CEO. But is that...
We had Jenny and Dennis Brown on our agenda as submitters.
Okay, well, we haven't had Dennis Brown. I have his submission, or I've got it, I've sent it to the CEO. It's David's.
Oh, he's down as the submitter, but anyway, I'm happy with that as long as other councillors are. If Carl wants to read it.
Okay. This is our, to hear the...
Just one moment, Grant. Carl, have you got the submission? No.
I haven't got it, Mayor. If it went to Blaga, she might be able to read it.
Blaga, do you have Dennis Brown's submission?
If Councillor Brooker wants to forward it to me, I can read it.
Can you forward?
Did you?
You haven't got it either?
I've got it. I've sent it, but apparently it's been read. So we're all good here.
That's what I thought.
Everyone's had their submission read. That's good.
Thank you. We'll get back to where I was. So we're now up to 02520. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Brooker.
Can I ask for the motion to refuse the permit be put up on the screen? Okay, look, I'm not going to read out all of the motion, but just the first paragraph so everybody knows what we're doing here. That the committee, acting under delegation from council, issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit to the land located at 103 Bannons Lane, Yarrambat, for use and development of the land for agriculture, olive grove, lemons and herbs, a restaurant in conjunction with agriculture, sale and consumption of liquor, associated buildings and works, and the installation and display of business identification signage on the following grounds. If you could maybe scroll through the grounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Maybe if you could have a minute on each one, Blaga, so people from home can read the actual reasons.
Councillors had sufficient time to read that? Just a nod will do. Thank you.
Maybe I was going to say maybe the first three again for 30 seconds.
Thanks, Councillor Brooker.
Thank you.
So the next question is, do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Detrimental, you had your hand up first. Over to you, Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. Let's start with the purpose of the zone. The Rural Conservation Zone, RCZ, the highest classification for protection of biodiversity and environmental values in the state and intrinsic to the identity of the Shire of Nillumbik. The Rural Conservation Zone provisions, there is not a word about tourism, not a word about commercial development, nothing about economic opportunity. The only way for a restaurant to be established in the RCZ is in conjunction with, in this case, its primary purpose of agriculture. The use as a restaurant must meet two tests. One, there must be an essential association between the two uses, and two, there must be a genuine, close, and continuing functional relationship. There is no essential association between the use of the land as an olive lemon grove and the operation of a restaurant. The restaurant can operate perfectly well without the olives and lemons that the applicant will be providing. Indeed, there is scarcely any association at all, let alone an essential one, between the two uses. The in conjunction test is not a pretext. A pretext is how a lawyer may get around a perfectly logical standard, and that is what is being attempted here. The officer report states that having plants in the ground would satisfy this requirement. That is the true test of just how unessential the olive and lemon groves are. The olive trees will take 6 to 8 years to bear fruit, maybe the lemon trees sooner, but this essential association test is years from being met. I am satisfied that the use for the land for a restaurant is the primary use sought, and the olive lemon grove simply a pretext to achieve that objective. On page 457, there is a stunning statement in the report, quoting, "The proposed use of the site for an agricultural purpose is considered to have an acceptable relationship with the proposed restaurant." That is not the standard that is used in the Nillumbik planning scheme. Page 449 tells us exactly. There must be a genuine, close, and continuing functional relationship, not an acceptable one. No genuine functional nexus can exist between a physical restaurant and a hypothetical olive lemon grove. It is unessential and now non-genuine. The question, is it a close relationship? An example is Yarrambat Cellars around the corner in Laurie Street, which has a permit to sell wine only from grapes grown on the property for 6 days a year. This is a huge contrast to what is being proposed. A continuing relationship, possibly after the establishment of the olive lemon grove in 6 to 8 years, but the primary use, agriculture, is at this point uncertain, unestablished, and does require a land management plan even in our report. Implicit in continuing is in the uses that the uses are coexisting, but you cannot be certain that they will be coexisting. Turning to the amenity issues, a car park, delivery access area, waste disposal area, 2 shipping containers are proposed. None are keeping with the siting provisions of clause 12, and none enhance the character of rural and scenic non-urban landscapes. There's been no consideration of the fact that 103 Bannons Lane is a high point in the area and noise travels down east, west, north, south. Clause 13021 states bushfire risk should be considered when assessing planning applications when this will result in people congregating in large number. That's 150 people in a 10 shed. The report addresses the issue by closing the restaurant on total fire ban days. Well, those days are not the only days where fire can ignite in Nillumbik. The traffic report does not represent an accurate analysis of the issues. Increased traffic with no footpaths, local walking tracks, bike riding trails, horse riding trails, and with no street lights, there will be certainly dangerous conditions for residents. Thank you.
Fire away, Councillor Demery.
Okay, I'm right to go. This land's RCZ Schedule 3, environmental overlay Schedule 1. Clearly in a green wedge, in an area where the green wedge is of vital importance. We've just got to cross the road to see what happens when you have unfettered development on the opposite side of Yanyeen Road. Green wedge needs to be protected against inappropriate development, and they're designed to enhance, to protect and enhance the valued attributes of the landscape and the land use. In our green wedge management plan, we sort of state that we support activity that is done in conjunction with existing uses, primary agriculture or environmental. This is an existing use with an imaginary future olive grove and lemon orchard. There is nothing to say that this would go ahead, and the 173 agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on. We have no way to enforce it going into the future, and we've shown that in numerous things at the moment that are showing up with activity occurring in the green wedge, and we're relying on other arms of government to enforce them. People have moved into this area knowing how strict the rules are around the zoning, and a lot of people, as we've heard tonight, have taken a level of comfort out of that, knowing that they won't be built out, knowing that they won't have large industrial farming or other innominate uses popping up next to them. As a council, we've got to take that responsibility seriously and stick to our plans. Just because someone says they might do something which may come to fruition in 8 to 10 years, when it is the sole purpose, sorry, the sole reason that we're granting a permit, it just makes absolutely no sense. There's also the siting of this establishment high on a hill. It is in contravention of the siting of most of our programs, and it is also against our preference to have commercial activity to be included in town centres and
Thank you, Councillor Dyer.
urbanised
Sorry
areas.
to
Thank
chop
you.
you off. Lost my mouse. Any other councillors wish to speak? No, we're all done. Councillor Perkins.
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, thank you. And you know, certainly support the motion and congratulate Councillor Brooker on the immense amount of work he's done. You know, definitely someone who listens to his constituents, the people in the local area, you know, who have a right to think that their councillor and council will do what they can do to protect the green wedge and the amenity of the local area. You know, the big issue for me is the in-conjunction test and really the message that this sends to this application and to any other part of the green wedge, if this is how we interpret the in-conjunction test, to say that, you know, agriculture is in conjunction with a restaurant as long as we stick 46 olive trees and 16 lemon trees in the ground. You know, restaurant can start up and operate, you know, for some years until perhaps those trees could bear fruit. It's a stretch. It's a stretch, and it's the biggest stretch that I've seen in 10 years on council. So, look, I can't support this application. I certainly think Councillor Brooker has put a very good argument up for refusal, and indeed so has the officer report. You know, any other time it's surprising, but I would sort of say the officer report is an argument for refusal more than it is for grant the permit. So I think it's all there. I don't think council would have anything to worry about with a VCAT challenge with this one. Aside from the fact that perhaps you know, having a councillor running around meeting applicants, or perhaps not the applicant, but at least two of the objectors, you know, is somewhat out of the ordinary, and certainly not something that I've been used to 10 years on Nillumbik Council. I know that other councils, you know, even the City of Casey, has some policy direction in this sort of matter, because we know that City of Casey had some problems over the years, but you know, their policy, and it's called the Protocols for Councillors, Land Use Planning. 4.2 talks about requests for meetings, correspondence, and phone calls. You know, councillors must not compromise themselves by having meetings, phone calls, or other correspondence with parties without council officers or other parties being present. Where communication does occur, a record of discussion is required. If this occurs in the absence of a council officer, then a copy of that record of any interaction must be provided to the council support officer to be placed on file. This is in the interests of transparency and places the active onus on the councillors to maintain the integrity during the course of any planning processes. A councillor must not express a view that demonstrates a bias or a preconceived view.
Thank
So,
you, Councillor Perkins. Sorry. So we now go to the next part of the process, and that is to vote for Councillor Brooker's amendment. So all those in favour? Sorry, what motion? Sorry, Councillor Brooker. All those in favour? All those against? And that is not carried. So we move back to division. All those in favour? Councillor Brooker, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Dyer, all those against? Councillor Egan, Councillor Ashton, Councillor Rankin, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Perkins. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to move the officer recommendation with one change. The change is on condition 17 on page 10 of the recommendations. I don't know if the officers can bring up the recommendation. If you can get to condition 17, and I'll set out what the change needs to be. So it would change the words, the third dot point, any other day, to Wednesday to Saturday. And take out any other day. The significance of that change is that it limits the operation of the restaurant, as the applicant indicated, to 5 days a week. I wonder if you might just scroll through, just so I can make sure the officers, let's go from the start, the recommendations as per the papers. I just want to give, there has been some changes made.
Just one moment, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Clark, if we just go back to point 17, just to make sure that things align, there was I think the first point was Sunday trading hours. You've got Sunday trading hours from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. and then on bullet point 3, you've got Wednesday. Oh, sorry, you've changed that.
Yep.
That's okay, sorry. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Back to you, Councillor Clark.
Start just to make sure that you have got the right sort of recommendations up, because I have got a couple of different sets. So 1A, condition below, Scroll through the J if you could. And you could just continue to scroll through just slowly if the officers would. 2 through to 4, 6, 7, thank you. They're all the same as per the earlier one.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, can you go back to 17?
Can we just wait till we get there? I'll just check these anyway. Go up to 10. Yes. Okay, it seems like the ones that I had seen as the amended set, which includes the requirement for landscape plans and other vegetation and bushfire management commentary. Just keep scrolling if you would. Thank you. Keep scrolling, thank you. Thank you, just keep going. Thank you. Might just stop at 17 again for the Mayor who had a question.
Yeah. Just the words, hang on. Just state the restaurant use. Where you're just missing the word restaurant. It's just consistent with all the other conditions, that's all.
Sorry, what are you suggesting?
Restaurant use.
Unless the prior consent from the responsible authority, you're saying the word restaurant should be before use.
Yeah, all of the other conditions have the word restaurant when you're talking about the use. It needs to be the restaurant use.
Restaurant use permitted only.
That's all. It's just to be consistent.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy with that.
All right. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Ashton. Over to you, Councillor Clark.
Councillors, at the outset, no one's doubting the zone. We know what the zone is. The question here is, what are the appropriate rules that are contained within the Nillumbik planning scheme which would permit the use? And is it compliant with those rules? And in detailed consideration, the officers have suggested that it is. Now, as Councillor Perkins has highlighted, I don't take anything for granted. I go to the sites, I look and understand it, I drive the area, which I spent some considerable time, and outside of the ward councillor, it's clear from Councillor Perkins' questioning, I'm the only one who did that. And I thank the two abutting neighbours for giving me the privilege to be able to understand the application from the site, and they were most gracious. Equally, as well as reading the officer's report, I sought to research the in conjunction test because there's no doubt that is contentious and will be contentious and always is. And I sought to read numerous in conjunction test determinations at VCAT where this has been tested. And there is no shortage of them. There's Mornington Peninsula versus the Wine Company. There is Neve versus Macedon Ranges. There is Genellic Park versus Mornington Council, Mornington Peninsula. There's Mornington Wine Company versus Mornington Ranges. Versus Macedon Ranges. There is 10 Minutes by Tractor versus Mornington Council. There's Snow versus Yarra Ranges. There's Healesville Environment Watch versus the Yarra Ranges Council. There is Brumbies Road Investments versus Manningham. I could go on. There is no shortage of tests about the in conjunction test. And, you know, you would argue when you read all of those, that some of them you could argue are tenuous. I would have thought probably the one that I read, which I thought was the most tenuous, was a Steiner school who was seeking to operate a school in a rural conservation area, quite a deal of development, and the argument being that part of their curriculum relates to the environment, therefore they wanted to be in an environmental zone. And that was supported. Most of the tests relate to agricultural use, such as we're talking about today. There are many analogies with exactly what's in front of us. And that clearly is why officers have understood the determinations of VCAT and what our planning scheme says. I equally understand that from a resident's perspective, they see a zone called something and believe that it may provide a level of protection in itself for anything happening other than green pastures and agricultural use. But that's not what the planning scheme says. And it's our job to determine matters in accordance with the planning scheme. And once you've done that, to determine matters in accordance with the planning scheme, create, and yes, there's a lot of conditions here, but create the greatest level of protections there can be to any abutting neighbour, which is why I went to see and understand the impacts of noise, of visual amenity, of impact of traffic, of other things, to understand road widths and other things, why I spent a good day just driving the area and understanding what this was going to be all about. So I could test all of the things that the officers were writing in their report and understand them as fully as I possibly could. And so I went back, and I certainly have asked officers a lot of questions. There are additional conditions from earlier reports about landscape, about traffic, about a whole raft of different matters, which I won't outline in the short period of time that I have tonight. But it is to say that there are now very clear conditions that say this is not going to be a function centre and not permitted. There are very clear conditions that say that they can have no music broadcast live or in any other manner. There are very clear conditions about hours and controls of hours which don't exist, which are greater than the applicant had asked for. So if you like, they've been cut back from what they wanted. You might say it's a very onerous set of conditions. And I understand this will probably get tested at VCAT, which is why when you've got something which meets the legal tests, you need to have those sort of conditions, because it does need to stand up at VCAT, because the alternative will be that if we refuse it that you may not get such strong conditions at a VCAT determination. So it's up to us to make sure that we can deliver an outcome that we can manage, that we have Section 173 agreements that control the in-conjunction test, to make sure it cannot open, cannot start until a proper farm management agreement's in place, etc.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, time.
I move the recommendation in accordance with the long list of conditions.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Look, first of all, I would like to say how much I did appreciate the emails from residents and the submissions tonight, and how I did look at them and I pursued any questions with officers with regards to the issues raised. It is a dilemma that although planners work in council, they work independently of council and councillors, and planners assess all applications on a case-by-case basis. We can obviously ask questions and we can request additional information, but planners work independently of us, and so they should. And this keeps the, the objectivity of the planning scheme and the way that they assess things on a case-by-case basis separate from council, and that is a good thing. We can also go out and inspect properties and talk to applicants and objectors, and I've done so on numerous occasions, and I think it's the least we can do. And I'm surprised that that has been raised as an issue tonight, and I have never realised that potentially I shouldn't have been doing that. Council has requested numerous conditions to eliminate impacts on residents as much as possible. We run the risk of denying the application, and if we do, it may be, it then goes to VCAT, and we may have far fewer conditions than we would like attached to it if that occurred. The in-conjunction test, as has already been stated, is not an easy test, and some may say it is a simplistic way of allowing businesses, mainly tourists, focused in the rural conservation zone. However, other than agricultural restaurants, wineries, kennels and catteries, there are a few discretionary uses allowed in this zone. I struggled with an application in Kangaroo Ground last year, beautiful grazing land, massive development, house, tea rooms, glass houses, coach bays, etc., etc. There was no objection from Friends of Nillumbik or the Greenwich Protection Group, or no inquiry from their then Chair of Planning, Councillor Perkins, or any of the other councillors. Officers deemed that it was a good application and therefore it went through. That is what happens. Under previous councils, we had Nillumbik Estate, Mazzaro's, Evelyn County, East Hill Winery, Red Box, the list goes on. And I think evidence shows that none of them have been particularly dominant in the landscape or have attracted huge crowds 7 days a week. Pleased to say that they've upped the level of agribusiness. In this case, the shipping containers will be removed, and that they will have at least 2 years prior to the restaurant opening to prove that they are serious about the agricultural business. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker, you are up just a smidgen before Councillor Demirick.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Look, well, I would say we heard Councillor Ashton talk for 3 minutes and do everything but address the application in Bannon's Lane. We heard about a whole lot of things, nothing about Bannon's Lane. The application has 51 conditions. Rather than take the difficult decision of rejecting the application, the planners have attempted to manage their way through the very obvious shortcomings by placing conditions on use that will ultimately prove to be less than acceptable. There is no acoustic report. A far better approach would be to obtain this report up front rather than grant a permit and then make it conditional on that report. That would provide certainty where we now have only community anxiety. The report calls for an amended farm management plan which specifies the overall number of each species to be planted. It is astonishing that this can proceed without such a document. So a permit is granted without knowing the number of trees that the existence of the restaurant is predicated upon. That does not reduce questions about the application, it raises them. There is no integrated land management plan. There is a business plan. It was indicative, I think, that the applicant's planner introduced himself as a business analyst at the beginning of this proceeding. We do have a plan that is titled that way, and that tells you everything you need to know about the underlying nature of this application. Dot point 12 lists 11 conditions that the council requires to be able to properly assess the application. All are currently those, voting in favour of this document have not seen. Currently, the restaurant can operate 365 days per year. We've just amended that. That may not be the intention, but that used to be what was existing. The maintenance of the green wedge and the rural conservation zone is it's an essential element in the continued public support of them. In conjunction tests, improperly applied, will establish a cycle of progressive loss of their value, less public acceptance of their importance, and reduced public willingness to advocate for their protection, resulting in even further loss. The management regime here is uncertain and its outcomes are not able to be quantified. A reasonable level of amenity akin to that expected in a rural environment is a legitimate expectation under the Nillumbik planning scheme. This proposal fails those legitimate expectations.
Thanks, Councillor Brooker. Councillor Jemerick.
It's another one of these decisions by a group of councillors that seem hell-bent on development at all costs. Councillor Clark made a list of 15 shires that would go into bat for you on a tenuous application. And clearly we're not one of them. All of those shires, Macedon versus, and we won't do it. We're the Green Wedge Shire and we're not even prepared to do it. Clearly, Councillor Ashton says that there's been no councillor interference on this. If you read that report, and we have a planner that is supposed to be here for the protection of the Green Wedge Shire, I am flabbergasted how they can come down with this this resolution. It is unbelievable. So I just can't say any more.
Thank you, Councillor Jemerick. Any others councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, look, this is a concern. Once again, look, the applicant's timing has been brilliant. Got in just in time, I think. This is the sort of thing that this council will be remembered for, in terms of its efforts to protect local amenity and the things that everyone cares about right across the Shire. Amazingly, what we've seen on this council is the leadership of Councillor Clark, where he behaves the way that he does, and then is followed on by other councillors. For Councillor Ashton to say that she never realised that it's inappropriate for her to meet with objectors or applicants like parties in a planning decision just astounds me. I nearly fell off my chair, and I wonder if that is the broader view of the other people who are supporting this application. That sort of base level of how to determine a planning application as a councillor doesn't seem to be with this council. So it's just amazing. Of course, I don't support the destruction of the Green Wedge and what we're seeing here tonight. I've got every confidence that this will be appealed at VCAT, and I hope it is. It needs to be, because this could set a very ugly precedent for the rest of the rural parts of the Shire. Councillor Ashton and Councillor Egan, you should be the last people supporting, this application in terms of the determination of the in-conjunction test. But you're the two supporting it. So, I despair. It is what it is. But I hope the residents have a full appreciation of what's going on here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been interesting, and I thank the residents for taking the time. I didn't respond to all of the residents, all of their emails, but I've sat here, I've listened to it, and I've read the reports. A couple of things that I just want to sort of touch on. My understanding and reading through it is that there's not going to be any buildings, any additional buildings being built, that they're already there. Following on from what the officers recommended is that the planners have to abide by the law. So I can't actually see how the officers are making the recommendation to us. They've sat with the applicant, they've gone through it thoroughly. And by no means do I see this as a destruction of the green wedge, particularly when there's no additional buildings being built. So how can that be? A couple of things that I certainly want to comment and further. The agriculture component, I think that that's a great thing, planting more trees. You can't tell me that that's not good for the environment. Doesn't matter whether they're olive trees or citrus or whatever. I think that's great for the environment. Assists the lungs of Melbourne to be able to keep producing the fabulous air in the environment in the area. Needless to say, and everyone around this table, around this Zoom meeting this evening knows that I'm in recruitment and many years in hospitality as well. And I think this is great. It's going to bring tourism. It's not going to bring hordes and busloads of people in, but it's certainly going to assist in the economy. And God knows we need that right now. We need jobs. We need to be able to help people to be able to put food on their tables. And I think it's a great effort that people are still prepared to spend and put up restaurants. I mean, you only have to walk down the street and there's so many shops that are closed. And here's a family that's trying to get one up and going and we're trying to beat him up. And that's just, officers are assisting us and giving us guidance and trying to assist them. I think it's great. And to be able to employ all of these extra people in our local community, I think is a wonderful thing. So it's, I commend it. I think it's going to be wonderful. I mean, you don't see hordes of people coming out of Nillumbik Estate or hordes of people coming out of Olivinia, which is in Manningham, they're not loads and loads of people. It's not going to be a freeway, for goodness sake, going in and out of these places. So I think they've done a terrific job and I take my hat off to them. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Right of reply, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Brooker, you've spoken.
I've got a question through the chair.
Yes, sure. For Rosa?
Yeah, for Rosa.
Yep.
Is she?
Won't be a moment. There you go.
Hi, Rosa. Look, Councillor Rankin, just gave us a lot of opinion, but also said that there were no additional buildings. That's not strictly true, is it? Because there is a new foyer constructed for this building.
You're on mute.
Through the chair, chair. There are no buildings that are proposed. There is an extension.
And that extension is the new foyer?
It's the new entryway, yes.
Yeah, and from memory, that's about half the size of what currently exists. Is that right?
Oh, I'd have to look at the plans again to give you an exact area, but it is substantial.
So it's not a new building then, Rosa?
It's not a new building, no.
Thank you.
Well, I think if you've got a 50% extension, it amounts to a new building.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Councillor Jemerick.
Rosa, is that a building that was supposed to be pulled down under a previous planning application?
No, there is another building, and that is proposed to be decommissioned as part of the conditions of the notice of decision if it is to be granted as part of this.
And this one wasn't supposed to be?
No, not this particular building.
And while you're there, Rosa, the shipping containers?
Shipping containers are there for storage purposes during construction and will be removed straight after construction.
So they'll be there for at least a couple of years till the agricultural side gets up and running.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just say at the outset that there's nothing whatsoever wrong with going to meet with residents and fully understand planning applications, totally in accordance with the provisions. And if Councillor Perkins is going to quote Casey as their example of good governance, he ought to choose his friends a bit better. Can I just say, just to talk on Built Form, there is a very minor extension. It is not a major extension to the south of the building, which is a reception area. There is a further minor extension for storage and a dry store to the north of the building. And it is true that there is also an external structure, pergola, to provide some coverway for outdoor seating. So there are minor extensions to the building, total of which, in my assessment, and if councillors had looked at the papers and certainly reading the drawings, they wouldn't have even needed to ask the questions, but they would equate to about 20% at best in terms of an increase in net floor area. The hard decision is actually to be able to support it, because it's very easy just to go, oh, well, you know, the vibe is that it's rural conservation and we'll just go down that path. You walk away from it and you feel good and you send some residents home feeling good about it. But the truth of the matter is, a job as a local government councillor is to make these harder decisions, where officers present you with a conundrum because your first instinct is to look at the zone and go, oh, do we really need to do this? But there are laws and there are rules under planning provisions, and just because you don't like them all the time doesn't mean you can ignore them, which is exactly what Councillor Brooker is trying to do. Play to the gallery, ignore the rules, run with the vibe. The harder decision is to essentially what we're doing is to create the rules, to be able to create the protections for the neighbours to ensure that whatever does proceed on this application will be...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark, your time's run out.
...into resolution. Thank you.
Councillor Brooker, do you have a
question through governance? Can you hear me? Look, just in terms...
anticipated.
This is 8.217 of the local law, because I know the Mayor has voted, we haven't heard from the Mayor, but she's voted against this, against the refusal and in favour of the permit granted. And I just said, the Mayor spent 2 years not saying anything about anything. But now we've got a situation where a number of objectors are in her ward, and I think they would really like to hear from her as to an explanation as to why she's voting the way she has. Now, debate from the chair says the chairman should seek to refrain from debate. The chairman may, however, choose to exercise the right to speak in favour or against a motion. So what I'm saying or asking governance, isn't that the case? And will the Mayor take this opportunity for the first time in 2 years and tell the people of Bannons Lane and the surrounding areas why she voted the way she did.
Through the chair, Councillor Brooker, I can't decide for the mayor whether she wants to speak or not, but you're right, the meeting procedure does allow for the chairperson, following all the other councillors' opportunity to speak. If she wishes to make a comment on an item, she can.
Thank you, Blaga. Despite your, sorry, Councillor Clark. Yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I understand the purposes of Councillor Booker's question was to seek to cause embarrassment to you.
Yes.
I just make the point that we have had a right of reply. There can be no more speakers. He equally knows that he equally seeks to create that embarrassment unfairly and inappropriately.
Thank you. Although I was about to say those exact words myself, Councillor Brooker. I totally agree with all what the previous councillors have said. I think the conditions are more than adequate and we run the risk of going to VCAT. That was the reason I voted for this. I'd rather have the conditions there rather than it go to VCAT and it not. And I know Peter Clark's already had his right of reply. I live 2 doors up from Nillumbik State. I'm on the top of a hill and I hear everything that my immediate neighbours are doing. I don't hear a thing from them. I don't hear the traffic. And I'm on a much better road than the Edward Henty Drive. Councillor Ashton is also in a similar distance from the Panton Hill Winery. She doesn't hear anything either. I think all of this is, a lot of it is being totally exaggerated. If I'd have moved in and the same thing was happening to me, I may have thought the same thing. But the reality is totally different. So that's the reasons I've gone the way I have. And I agree with Councillor Rankin, we're not destroying the green wedge. The green wedge will die unless we get some funds to help support it. And when you look at our record, that's exactly what we've done in this council. So we'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? And I call division. All those in favour? Councillor Egan, Councillor Rankin, Councillor Ashton, Councillor Clark. All those against? Councillor Brooker, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Demerick, and that is carried. Thank you. Our next report is FN 026, amendment to permit. Use of the land as a building materials. I've just got to get my other screen up. Landscape yard and timber yard and buildings and works associated with a car park and warehouse and proposed business identification signage at 18 Brisbane Street, Eltham and 19 Bridge Street, Eltham and 19A Bridge Street, Eltham. And we have one submitter, Morgan Bastone, on behalf of Urbis Proprietary Limited. And we've got Morgan in the room. And I'll just unmute you. And fire away, Megan. You've got 3 minutes like the other presenters, and then councillors can ask you a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to present. I represent the landowner and the applicant who is proposing an amendment to an existing planning permit for a Bunnings Trade Supplies Centre. He is the landowner of the site as well as a ratepayer. He will also be the developer behind the project. So it's a flow-on effect, not only from a land use perspective in terms of utilising his site, but it's also an important part of his business. Bunnings is not my client, but they have been instrumentally involved in the terms of the application and particularly in relation to how the trade suppliers will operate. Planning permit was issued by the council officers. We worked really closely with the council officers to get to that point. They were very, very good in terms of their interpretation of the planning scheme controls and their consideration of the merits of the proposal. One thing that was unclear at the time of issuing the planning permit was the size of the lift required to service the centre. And on that basis, a contingency condition was put in requiring the largest lift that Bunnings offers. The contingency condition was based on the ability for the applicant to come back to the council officers to inform them of the size of lift required for the facility, keeping in mind that this is a trade supply centre, not a retail centre. And that is a significant difference on the basis that during COVID lockdown, retail Bunnings are shut, whereas trade supplies facilities with a drive-through are still open. They're still open on the basis that they service the largest percentage of the catchment being small-scale constructors and developers, rather than mums and dads who will continue to use a retail centre. This amendment is before you because of a council call-in. Without the call-in, the officers had indicated support to the amendment. They've been educated in terms of the operation. They fully understand from Bunnings' perspective what kind of lift is now required. It is not the full-size lift. It is the lift currently proposed as an amendment that will service the centre appropriately. Very mindful that council elections are coming up. If this is a political decision, it's not about the lift. The lift has been tested. Bunnings and the council officers are fully aware of the size of the lift that's required. If this is a political decision, then it should be about the economic stimulus of the proposal. Construction, employment opportunities following post-construction, and the flow and effect of this centre. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. Councillors, questions? Councillor Clark. Sorry, Councillor Clark, you're muted.
Morgan, if I recall rightly, you were not at any of the pre-app meetings we had with the applicant or Bunnings?
I was. You weren't involved in terms of the pre-application meeting with the council officers, as well as a meeting that was held following the council's request for further information. At those meetings, I was in attendance with other members of Urbis, as well as members from Bunnings and my client.
Outside of COVID periods, will the general public, you might call retail customers, mums and dads, be utilising this facility?
It is open for mums and dads to utilise the facility, but you've got to remember the type of product that is being sold here. It is bulk cement, bulk timber, large-scale projects in terms of materials and goods. The ability to move this facility...
Another speech. I just asked if it was available to retail.
It is, but I've got to be able to explain the answer to you, please, with due respect.
I was just going to ask you about that second matter that you raised. Is the existing store going to continue to carry the same range of goods that it currently carries?
So the idea of moving the trade supplies from the existing facility to across the road is to ensure that the trade supplies requirement from Bunnings and the catchment of this facility is serviced appropriately. What it will do is allow for the vacated space in the existing Bunnings to continue to provide for small scale building materials that would be more relevant to mums and dads. The mums and dads are still open to use the trade supplies facility that has a permit approved, but it's 90% catchment is going to be builders, contractors who understand the convenience of driving through a drive-through facility to pick up large-scale cement, timber, stone supplies.
Of any of those supplies that you just named, can mums and dads buy them, continue to buy them in the existing store, or they all need to go to the trade supplies store?
There will be limited provision for those sorts of supplies at a mums and dads scale to be available within the existing facility. It's not going to be your trades, it's not going to be at the volume that you would expect in a trades facility, but that's not to discount that mums and dads might not have the need to buy bulk stone. The issue being here is that the convenience of having a drive-through facility will ensure that even a mum and dad will order and drive through the drive-through facility so they don't have to carry heavy products to their car. It's all about convenience. The drive-through facility is there to service, obviously, the larger catchment of constructors, builders.
If I can ask the questions rather than get another speech on every issue, can I ask the question then of what other stores that Bunnings has that has any sort of trade or even retail use has a lift to access the car park which is below it?
There are existing facilities that have a lift, so that we're not opposing the requirement of a lift. We're opposing the size of the lift. The current condition allows for an oversized lift that's not suitable for a trade supplies facility.
Answer the question. Are there any other stores, and where are they in Victoria?
I understand there's one in Richmond, but I'd have to go back to Bunnings to give you that answer. As I said to you at the start of this meeting, my client is not Bunnings. My client is the landowner of the site.
So let me help you. The store is in Collingwood, because I've actually been to the stores to check them out, and it's the only one that does. And the lift condition that we currently have is a bit smaller, but not dissimilar to the Bunnings lift that occurs at Collingwood, which is the only precedent, which actually works quite well.
Well, that's all right, because the lift that we're proposing is consistent with that. You've just said it yourself that the current lift within the permit condition is larger than what exists in that facility.
No. What I've just said is that what our current conditions are, our current conditions is what the lift is in Collingwood, which is why
not require this facility. This facility is a sole trade supplies facility.
I'm adding to the conversation. Thank you.
Any other questions from any other councillors? Councillor Rankin.
Sorry, Mayor. Just a bit confused here. You mentioned before that this is a solely a trade store that you're proposing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you also said before that there's a likelihood that 10% could be mums and dads using the store. Is that correct?
That's right. All Bunnings trade supplies are open to the public.
Sorry, I'm at a loss here. Is this a trade-only store or not?
All Bunnings stores, in terms of a trade supply facility, are open to the public as well as the tradies.
So the proposed building that's going up, is this a trade-only store?
It's a trade supplies store. A lot of Bunnings have the retail component mixed in with their trade supplies. The proposal here...
So this facility can be used by mums and dads, yes?
Correct.
Right, so it's not a trade-only store. So therefore, a mum or dad might need a bigger lift to be able to transport materials downstairs into the car park. Thank you.
Perhaps if I can ask a different question, a similar question the same way. If I'm a mum, but I'm also a landowner and I regularly go through trade areas in Bunnings, if I want to access the main part of Bunnings and buy some garden hose, but I also want some timber and some rock, what do I do?
Depends on the quantity, Mayor. If there's a small amount of rock and a small amount of timber, you'll get it in the big facility. But if you're after wholesale amounts of rock or timber, then you would leave the existing facility and go through the trade suppliers. And more often than not, you would go through the drive-through facility because it's the most convenient for someone to pack it for you rather than...
How do I get my hose? How do I get my hose from the other side of the store?
Correct.
I can't. All right. Any other questions? Councillor Ashton.
So what's your main objection to having a bigger lift?
It's not needed. It won't be used as much as the general public thinks. This is a trade facility. So mums and dads.
So it's a drive-through. There'll be a forklift that comes down a ramp, so the lift won't be used.
Well, the The lift is there for staff members. The lift is there for mums and dads if they choose to park in the car park. But think about it yourself. If you've ordered bulk material in terms of rock, timber, cement, would you not utilise the drive-through facility? Would you not use the staff members to carry all that material and load it into your car for you?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from any other councillors? Thanks very much, Morgan.
Thank you.
Right. I don't know about other councillors, but I'm still confused. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Clark. And as per the papers,
Yes.
They are rather long. And can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Rankin, back to you, Councillor Clark.
I'm sorry, I'm lost. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I didn't know. There's no muting, and now I can't see everybody because I got the resolution up. So I'm happy for you to take the resolution down. Councillors, not surprisingly, you're probably feeling confused and misled because that's what's happened with this application all the way along. I've had no end of meetings with Bunnings and the applicant, and they've continued to say they're moving all of their timber and their trade, their concrete and everything else, which is all in bags. You're not going in there with a backhoe and filling up your trailer. It's all in bags, going over to this other site, and they've got new product to come in where that was. We've got another application for that site to deal with that particular matter. There are 26 cars that sit below this, and your only way at the moment of getting most of your product downstairs or getting it downstairs is to be able to, if we don't have a decent sized lift to be able to make this thing work properly, which is exactly what they've got at their Collingwood store, is to actually bring your trolley out on the street and go down a fairly steep incline and then back in the vehicular entrance into the car park, which is a disaster. For anybody who lives locally, Bridge Street clogs with traffic regularly, most and worst on Saturdays, can be back right up to Main Road. And the problem here is we don't want people clogging. We need to get people through Bunnings very, very quickly. In the short period of time I've got, part of my concern here is that the same spot where 3 trailers can park in the building, and that's the only use in the building, is the same spot where they load and unload goods when they come in. There is a massive conflict here. There is not even anywhere on this site for them to be able to deal with rubbish. They've got to take that to the other side. This has not been the best application of all time, but nonetheless, we're trying to make it work. We've certainly had lots of, I think 5 objections from some of the industrial users on the other side of the road because they are concerned rightly that tradies with trailers and mums and dads are using their car park for Bunnings purposes because they can't get into the Bunnings car park, and this will exacerbate their problem, which is why they are objectors. And so what I've sought to do from day one of the original permit was to be able to get an outcome here which will make sure that this thing works properly. I've visited a whole bunch of Bunnings sites to see how their trade stores works, to understand it. Just as I said on other applications, I researched them thoroughly. I've sat at Collingwood, looked at how it works. They've got 2 lifts. Both of them are bigger than what they're proposing here. One's a bit smaller than the other. And they require every square millimetre of that to get the plasterboard and the timbers and everything else through it. And I've got no doubt we've got this right. I've received no shortage of fairly abrupt and direct, to put it pleasantly, calls from the applicant, who was just represented by an equally abrupt and direct, sometimes indirect, in response to questions, representative, telling me that Bunnings won't pay enough to forward this lift. That's not our problem. The problem is, and that's the only reason he's given me after 3 or 4 conversations. That's not our problem. Our problem is to get a good planning outcome. Our problem is to get an outcome which is not going to exacerbate Bridge Street, is not going to have a negative impact on all of the abutting residents in this industrial area, and it simply just works. And that's what we did with the initial application. All of the applicant is looking for now is a management plan which is trying to argue a case that they all of a sudden they're going to have a whole bunch of people who are going to load and unload your goods for you. It will be the only Bunnings in all of Australia that you pull into. So by what we heard from the presenter, although they've never given us anything in writing, the fact that I've asked for it numerous times, but the only one where Bunnings actually loads it into your car. They don't even let you take a basket out the door of their shop. You can only have a trolley. And they want to limit the size of the trolleys that you can use by reducing the size of the lift and indeed diminish the goods. So all I'm suggesting to you, other than doing this properly, we will end up with a second-rate outcome, and I'm not going to be party to that, given the already perceived and very clear indications of the dramatic impacts on traffic that it has on a Bridge Street now. We've got to get this right, and I've not been persuaded at all. If I thought it was going to work, no problem. I'm not looking at adding cost to the development one iota. But Bunnings and the applicant been evasive all the way along, and nothing's changed tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Before we'll go to your seconder, can we just get your proposed motion up on the table, because I think there's some confusion. It isn't what's in the papers. You knew that, but you couldn't see it. Now,
there should be 2, 3 and 4 as well.
Just one moment.
Do you wish me to read it?
I think you better for governance sake.
Sorry, if you can go back. Well, I've actually got it in front of me. So it reads that the committee acting under delegation from council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant an amended permit to the land located at 18 Brisbane Street, 19 Bridge Street, Eltham, and 908 Bridge Street, Eltham, for the land for the use of the land as a building materials and landscape yard and timber yard and buildings and works associated with a car parking warehouse and proposed business identification on the following grounds. 1, the proposed reduction in the dimension of the lift fails to accommodate all of the trolley sizes Bunnings uses, which creates a situation where centre management erroneously have to regulate the movements of, onerously have to regulate the movements of individual customers to avoid customers using a public footpath as a thoroughfare to access the Undercroft car park. The outcome is not considered to be an appropriate response to the decision guidelines found under the Industrial Zone 3 relating to loading and service. 2, the proposal will have an adverse effect on the amenity and safety of the area as a result of the customers using the public footpath to transport purchased goods to the Undercroft car park. The outcome has the potential to create a traffic safety hazard as contrary to the purposes of the Industrial 3 Zone and Clause 65.1 decision guidelines of the Nillumbik planning scheme with regard to safety and amenity. 3, the proposed reduction in the dimension of the list will not allow customers to easy and efficient movement of purchased goods between the car park and retail floor area, which is contrary to the requirements of 18.02-4S car parking of the Nillumbik planning scheme. 4, that the proposal will not contribute to the orderly planning of the area as required by Clause 65.01 of the Nillumbik planning scheme.
All right, thank you. So it's now over to you, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I agree with Councillor Clark on this one. There's, I find Bunnings in Eltham a real challenge to get to, particularly with your tandem trailer. So I question the car park situation that's proposed and how the Bunnings staff are going to unload or load you up. Generally in the retail shop they're very helpful, but ask them to come out to the car and assist carrying bags of concrete, and no, it's against OH&S policies. So I just find it very difficult, and for the gentleman to be able to turn around and say that it's a trade store, so you're going to have the big 4-wheel drives, and yeah, I'm guilty, I've got one, and with tandem trailers going through there, and you're going to have mums and dads and kids, and at least the way it's currently set up, you get most of your trade people down the other end of the car park. But I just question how this is all going to work. It just seems like a dog's breakfast at the moment. It's just ludicrous. And I mean, trolleys going down footpaths with bags of cement on them, that's a real concern going down the hill there. I mean, that's just opening everybody up for insurance claims, and it's just ludicrous. I think these guys need to really have a good long hard look at the lift and the trolleys that they currently use, and at least provide a lift that fits all of the Bunnings trolleys in. Seriously, guys, get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker?
I don't wish to speak, but just to maybe throw some illumination on what I'm finding difficult to kind of get through my head. Is Rosa around again? We called on her a few times tonight, so she may have.
Yes,
still
one moment, Councillor Rankin.
Brooker.
Councillor Brooker.
That's one of the most grievous insults I think you've ever lobbed my direction, but look.
I thought it might have been the Perkins-Clark mix-up before.
No. Okay. Rosa, explain to me why the officer recommendation thought a smaller lift would suffice.
Through the chair, the officers considered all the, I suppose, the information that was submitted as part of the application, and I guess looked at the method in which the delivery of the goods to the customer would be achieved. The size of the lift also allows 2 trolleys to fit within the lift, providing, I suppose, opportunity for goods to be transported.
Not if you've got a big plank of wood on it. Councillor Clark.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
I just wanted to make it clear what Rosa was saying. It only allows 2 trolleys to go into the lift if there's no people in the lift. Or you're meaning 2 types of trolleys?
It allows 2 trolleys to fit into the lift.
But on the drawing, TP3, which is attached to the report, it shows 1 trolley and 2 people. It doesn't. You get 2 people, but you can't get 2 trolleys. You can either have 1 trolley with 2 people, or 2 trolleys and no people.
Sorry, it's two sizes of trolleys can fit in the lift.
2 sizes of trolleys, not 2 trolleys.
A trolley and a person.
Yes, right. Thank you.
2 people.
Yeah, and from what we hear, there's one type of trolley that Bunnings have that doesn't fit into this sized lift. Is that correct?
I believe it's correct. The 3rd size won't fit in there.
And that would be the biggest one to be able to carry a couple of bags or 4 bags of cement on, would it not?
I believe so, yes.
So imagine that one. And half the time, and those trolleys, the wheels don't work properly to start off with, and then you get it running down the.
There a question from Rosa here, Bruce. I don't think she needs to comment on trolley wheels. Any other questions for Rosa while we've got her?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just confusing. Why did you say this lift is big enough? Because it could fit in 2 trolleys or 1 trolley and 1 person. So you thought that's fine.
So it relies on the premise management plan, and that talks through the options of having the goods delivered to the customer. It doesn't necessarily rely on the customer delivering the goods to their vehicle by themselves. And on that premise, and on the premise that, you know, it still does allow for a trolley to fit into the lift, there's options moving forward for a customer to have the goods delivered to them or for them to transport their goods to their own vehicle.
Councillor Clark has been saying that the premise Bunnings don't have, that's a problem, that they don't have a premises management plan. Is that not so?
This is covered by conditions of the permit.
That they have one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Rosa, he talked about it being a trade store, and as such, they're going to have trade quantities going through there.
Mhm.
The lift big enough to take a trolley jack and a pallet with concrete on?
The lift is big enough to accommodate certain sizes of trolleys. Whether it can accommodate a jack, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
I'm just curious,
But that would be delivered down. That would be delivered by Bunnings to the customer at their vehicles, a click and collect type scenario for those sort of bigger, bulkier sort of items.
So I must have missed it. Was there a ramp somewhere for the forklift to drive down? Rhetorical question.
Thank you. Any other councillors have any questions? Councillor Perkins.
There wasn't a question. I was going to continue with debate, but I'll wait for questions.
Well, I think we've finished with you, Rosa. Over to you, Councillor Perkins, for debate. Sorry, Councillor Clark's got one more for Rosa.
Sorry,
and then you, Councillor Perkins.
I just wanted to be clear on the answer with respect to Councillor Brooker's question. There is a condition requiring a management plan of how they would deal with loading, but we haven't got it yet.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Councillor Brooker, my concern has been, despite numerous questions of Bunnings, they've never been able to provide one. So there is a condition in there, but I don't trust any of their conversations thus far.
Thank you, Councillor.
But before they can get the permit for the lift, they'll have to produce it, won't they?
That's right, and it has to be to our satisfaction.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Perkins, you're on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Clark was, he took the words straight out of my mouth. I was thinking about, the issue of trust, and I have an officer recommendation in front of me, and I trust their work. The alternative is to trust Councillor Clark's work. I'm not going to get involved in Councillor Clark's pissing competition with the applicant here. Generally, he supports the applicant. We know there's a couple that he despises. It appears Bunnings.
Can you refrain from using language like that, Councillor Perkins, because I'm not putting up with it.
Applicant?
The other word, the competition.
Oh, he's been involved in a competition. With the applicant. Usually he would support the applicant. That's been my view. There's been a couple of outstanding times when he hasn't. Lorden, of course, is one, and this. But he talks about no end of meetings with Bunnings and the applicant. That really does concern me. Again, there is a broad understanding amongst local government in Victoria and probably around Australia that it's inappropriate for any councillor to have, no end of meetings with the applicant or the landowner or objectors, without witnesses there. It goes to the interests of transparency, places the onus on the councillor to maintain integrity, and this flies in the face of it. Councillor Clark, has to be the boss hog, unfortunately. Too often he really doesn't know his place. He's not a planner. He's not an officer. If there's a project, Councillor Clark steps in and he thinks he's a project manager. The way I've seen him, bully the applicant tonight. Other times, he certainly, bullied councillors, bullied objectors. It's inappropriate. It's inappropriate behaviour. It goes to trust. I trust the officer's assessment of this. Councillor Clark has a personal dislike for the applicant. He's referred to them tonight as not trustworthy. Yeah, I'm staggered. I can't, when I come up with the sort of stuff I've heard tonight, I have to support the officer recommendation. They are the planners. It's not Councillor Clark. They are the professionals. They're the ones that know what they're doing, as far as I'm concerned. And the excessive interference of Councillor Clark in this application, I think, is totally out of order. So no, I'm not going to support Councillor Clark's motion because, I'd have to have a shower.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Right of reply, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. The personal attacks by Councillor Perkins should not amaze anybody. Just for the record, only for the record, the usual pathetic commentary of Councillor Perkins. I've only ever had meetings with these applicants with the officers, and in fact, a number of phone calls I refused to take and said to officers, could you please ask this guy not to keep ringing me? I'm not going to be meeting without officers present. Just for the record, Councillor Perkins. I find it amazing now you want the tables turned. You trust the officers, you support their recommendations, except for the previous application where you didn't trust the officers and you didn't like their outcome. All applications are determined on their merits. They're determined on their merits based on what the information is that we have. It's my view that the officers in this case have been misled. Misled because they've been told they'll get a plan which occurs nowhere else in Victoria. Again, I've spent the time going to other sites, looking at a whole bunch of other trade and retail stores. There's nothing that is like this other than in Collingwood. And that's where they've got the appropriate management outcome. I don't want a second-rate outcome for our community. I never want a second-rate outcome for our community. I understand the officers have been persuaded by a condition they believe will be achievable. But the nature in which we've heard tonight, and what I've heard consistently in every meeting I've had with officers there and applicant there, has never led, we've never got straight answers about what's going to be in what store and how they're going to manage this. There is, if you look on the drawings, the loading area is the same as where there are 3 trailers to be parked. At the moment, unless we get this right with the right lift to make this as simple as possible to get down to the car park, it will be a disaster, and I don't want that for our community. Commend the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We'll now put the motion to the vote. That wasn't the recommendation, it was the second motion, just to clarify that for the record. All those in favour? All those against? Division, all those in favour? All those against? And Councillor Brooker, your hand hasn't gone up. Sorry.
I thought I'm running out of time to abstain, so I thought I might on this one.
All right, and that is carried. Thank you. We now move on to FN 02720, and we have no submitters for that. So can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program. Councillor Demerick. Sorry, Councillor Demerick. Can I ask you to start again? Can I ask you to start again, please? Gotcha.
Yep. So it's the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program. That the recommendation is that the committee acting under delegation of council notes the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program funding allocation to Nillumbik Shire of $739,151, excluding GST. And 2, it approves the submission to the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications for the proposed works under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program.
Sorry, just one moment. Councillor Clark, you had something?
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah.
I don't know when you're muted or not muted at the moment.
All right.
I wish to second the resolution.
Right, well, I was just about to say that. Are you having trouble hearing me? Back to you, Councillor Demerick.
The Australian government's announced $500 million of Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program. It's aimed to support and deliver priority local roads and community infrastructure across Australia, supporting local economies to bounce back from COVID-19. As I said, the Nillumbik is receiving an allocation of $739,000 and a little bit. And there's a number of criteria which have been applied to the funding. And it supports things like on the roadside, traffic lights, traffic equipment, street signs, bridges, tunnels, roads for heavy vehicle connection, facilities to support a visitor economy, and roads and footpath maintenance with additional capital work schedules, that are additional to capital work schedules. There is also things that are within the community infrastructure, so closed circuit TV, bikes, walking paths, improvement of community facilities, repairing fencing, improved accessibility to areas, landscaping, picnic shelters, playgrounds, skate parks, noise and vibration mitigation measures, off-road car parks. The officers have put together a series of work schedules which they're planning to forward to the department and looking for our approval. They include road upgrades in Butlers Road, plenty, between Memorial Drive and McElroy Drive, sealing the road. It's approximately 200 metres of curb and channel, and underground drainage and for traffic attenuation. Activity centre street upgrade for Elizabeth Street, Diamond Creek, with indented car parking on the northern side of Elizabeth Street. Accessibility and walking improvements in various locations around Eltham, including footpath along Youth Road and Diamond Street, Susan Street and Burham Street is what I'm trying to say, which sees another 183 metres of curb and channel. Outdoor seating and tables at the Hurstbridge Hub, along with minor landscaping, footpath, signage and fruit trees. St Andrews wayfinding sort of program, which is creative ways, wayfinding elements that be designed to allow visitors, such as the well-known market day up there, to experience more of St Andrews and navigate the town safely. The Hurstbridge Skate Bowl, removal and relocation of the skate bowl. The bowl has gone beyond its lifetime of usefulness. A new park will be built, and a dust extraction unit. Sorry?
It's being moved, not sort of a new park being built. It'll be moved with the other stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a dust extraction unit for the Eltham and District woodworkers. So quite a variety of programs, all sort of being brought forward to this budget cycle, and I commend the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demerit. Councillor Clark.
Mayor, I presume I'm unmuted this time.
Correct.
So look, I also wish just to very briefly recognise the contribution of the federal government to assist us in a $740,000 program to assist the community to come out of COVID with other good works. I'm particularly excited about the opportunity for an additional $200,000+ to be expended on basic works such as additional footpaths, particularly in Susan and Brome Street. I was in those streets today, and it will assist in overcoming some of the conflicts there between some of the industrial users and the pedestrian users, particularly as kids use that particular path and direction to get to Eltham High School. So it's a very positive outcome that we're going to be able to achieve there. I just wanted to comment on the first one. Whilst we are going to do Butlers Road plenty for $200,000, in a perfect world, we wouldn't be doing that project. We'd be doing a project in Wattle Glen. Essentially, this has come about, and our need to do this is a result of some rat runs that occurred as a result of Yan Yean Road Stage 1, where the outcomes were either not properly considered but we've ended up with a rat run, which is starting to have a dramatic impact on this road, which requires us to put the curb and channel in and do it properly, which the state government didn't do when they did Yan Yean Road Stage 1. I just encourage us when they're doing Yan Yean Road Stage 2 to take a tougher line to be able to make sure that we don't end up having to patch up outcomes as a result of other road projects and having to expend the Commonwealth monies to fix this thing up. We do need to do it, and I'm sorry we're not going to get to do the important work in Wattle Glen, which will hopefully come up to some other budget cycles shortly. But this is a very good opportunity for the Shire, and I thank the federal government for their contribution as part of the $500 million local roads project that Councillor Dumerick referred to, and look forward to the very good opportunities that will assist, particularly I think the important bit of work around the Hurstbridge Skate Bowl, which will enable that to relocate and get a far better outcome for that sector of the community in that location. So they're on good and down to some smaller projects. And I want to congratulate the woodworkers. A number of us have been to their annual presentations. But they're making a contribution of $12,000 towards this, and that will be good to be able to get that extraction work in, which we've been keen to do. So some good projects of different scales, and I commend the work. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins. Wait for it. Go.
Thank you. Look, yeah, I'd just like to support the motion as well, and yeah, again, thank the federal government for that $740,000. It's fantastic to get free money. We don't often get free money. Usually, grant programs, it's a one-to-one contribution. You know, very, very rarely we get one from the state government. We got one recently, which was we put in 10%, we get 90%, but you know, this is 100% funding, so very, very welcome. You know, the activity centre street upgrade, you know, just for the offices, I just hope as part of that upgrade, you know, we do some consultation with the businesses in Elizabeth Street and Station Street. You know, my hope is that that indented car parking will be available for the businesses to support those businesses. You know, they do it tough. It's one of the very, very few industrial areas in the Shire, Elizabeth Street and Station Street, and they're often disadvantaged by being very close to the train station and really the lack of car parking there. So we end up with car park. If this car parking is not managed, it will just become commuter car parking, and that's not the intent. The intent is to support the business in the industrial areas, so people can use those businesses, perhaps park there for a few hours, not for the whole day while they're on the train and working in the city. So I just encourage officers to take that request on board and you know, do the consultation with the businesses and get it right to begin with, rather than you have to try to fix it up later on. The Hurstbridge Skate Bowl, you know, Hurstbridge, the current bowl, it's the newest one in the Shire. I was actually opened it when I was mayor in Hurstbridge, and what was supposed to happen was that old redundant bowl was supposed to be removed at the time, and you know, the new one was the new one. But you know, Hurstbridge have done well, really through perhaps it was let slip, and anyway, they've got two for the price of one. So that old one that was supposed to be made redundant and demolished is now being moved to the new one and an upgraded facility. So Hurstbridge have done very well in that instance, and you know, good luck to them. But that's a good the work schedule I support, and yeah, thanks again to the federal government.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. Yes, just to say I want to thank the federal government as well. Cash for infrastructure is something we always welcome. Now, it always comes up, doesn't it, on our annual community survey that traffic or roads and then is it traffic congestion are always the number one or two issues. So to be able to provide, you know, 739,000 directed sort of to that area and community infrastructure is clearly very welcome. In terms of that, we can never seem to build enough footpaths. There's always places we need to upgrade for accessibility reasons all over the Shire. So it's just very welcomed. I think it was a process that went through, I'm happy to say, uncontentiously. Everyone accepted there was some projects in their respective wards. I think that really kind of worked well. I'll just comment on Butlers Road by saying I think it is an investment from the Shire into that road. If there was ever a special charge scheme for that road, council would be picking up 50% because the entire eastern side is owned by the council. So I think it was prudent to use this money in that area. And you know, I'm pleased about it. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
Well, again, thank the federal government. Really great that I've got $30,000 towards the wayfaring signage in St Andrews. And I think the beauty of the St Andrews plan is that this was a master plan that was written under previous councils, and it was a very good plan and it engaged the community, and we're gradually working through it. And that's how plans should be. They should be plans that engage community, are realistic, and can potentially be pursued by various councils over various timeframes. And I think when we only have small amounts of money, this shows that various things can be ticked off the list. And I look forward to working with the group in St Andrews to, you know, ticking the next thing off their list as far as the wayfaring signage is concerned. So, yeah, good outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ashton. Anybody else? Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the federal government for the support here. I think it's wonderful, and the projects that are going to be created and followed through, particularly for the woodworkers. I think that's a great outcome for them. I think they'll benefit immensely out of that. The footpaths around Eltham, and particularly the streetscape around Diamond Creek, and Councillor Perkins has a very good point there that need to ensure that there's some good consultation down there as well. I am disappointed that that the state government hasn't pushed through with the Leanne Drive traffic lights. We had those on the mark 4 years ago. We haven't seen any action. They're still part of the Fitzsimmons Lane. I'd really like the local member to be able to try and push those through before there's another injury or another accident down there. I think I've made my point, but thank you to the federal government to support these projects through.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. We'll get to the important part. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Now, it isn't the end of the evening. Clause 12.1 of the meeting procedures local law states that we do have an item of special urgent business, and clause 12.1 of the meeting procedures local law states that unless all councillors are present and unanimously agree to deal with another matter, only the business specified in the notice or resolution is to be transacted. Subject to any resolution providing otherwise, the order of business of any special meeting must be the order in which such business stands in the agenda for the evening. So I ask that a councillor move a motion to allow the urgent business item, traffic restrictions and actions regarding Chapel Lane and Middle Hut Road, Doreen, be admitted to the order of business for tonight's special meeting. Councillor Clark. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ashton just got in first. So we now need to put that to the vote so we can talk about it. Sorry, Councillor Clark, you can talk to it, sorry. You're on.
I wish to speak to it. Mayor, we are all aware of the very concerning matters with respect to the dumping of fill at 130 and 256 Chapel Lane. We are seeking to deal with those.
Excuse me, Councillor Clark, can I just interrupt you? I need to extend the time of the meeting.
I'm happy to mention, do you need a time period too?
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm happy to move an extension of time.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rankin. All those councillors in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Continue.
So I'm just saying that the concerning matters of trucks and dumping of rubbish, dumping of fill, I'm sorry, it is getting late, dumping of fill at Chapel Lane. And as a consequence of that and our attempts to try and resolve that matter as quickly as possible and make the community aware of where we're up to in that process, albeit constrained by what we can say publicly, given we're dealing with a difficult second circumstances of users of 256 and 130 Chapel Lane. I've sought to bring a urgent resolution to the council to essentially ensure that the community is better informed by way of information on our website about what we are doing, specifically with the planning matters associated with those two sites. And then secondly, to deal with and start a process around trying to deal with the safety implications of the current users of that road for the purposes of the fill with the trucks. But my proposals, which if we get to debate them later on, councillors may not agree with some of it, but unless we get an agreement to at least have the conversation, which is all I'm seeking at the moment, then it will mean that we don't get to do anything to try and fix these problems for another week. I'm not suggesting that a resolution tonight is going to provide immediate solutions for everything by any stretch, but it is a delay for a week, which we don't need to have. So I'd encourage the councils to provide the opportunity to at least look and consider the matters of how we can improve the lives and amenity of those residents in Chapel Lane, which I'm sure is all our preferred outcome. So I call on you to allow the inclusion of that rather than having to wait till next week when we would be dealt with as a notice of motion in any event.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Over to you, Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, look, I think the residents have been waiting for us to do something for a long while, and we have to be very careful, and I have been talking to residents about it, that, we have to make sure that planners and what we do have some teeth. I think in the short term, I think it's good that we do act, and I support the idea that we act with regard to traffic issues along the road. So I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Sorry, it's more of just a question. I just want to make sure I've got the process right. This is just a motion to include the item onto the agenda. We're not debating the actual item?
Correct.
Okay, yep, I'm in support.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'll hand over to you to put the motion up.
Yeah, I wonder if officers, as you know, I circulated one earlier today. Officers have suggested some amendments.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to, and councillors have asked some questions, and I think that picks up some questions councillors have asked. So I'm happy to incorporate that. So the resolution that's going up is one which, from about 3 o'clock today, with some further suggestions of officers. So if you can bring that up, and I might just read it through for those who are still awake and with us. And that would be that the council resolves to provide regular updates on council's website with respect to the use and development of land at 265 and 130 Chapel Lane, and to keep the community up to date on actions to resolve the disposal of fill on these sites, including our letters of planning scheme amendment to the Minister for Planning and any responses received. B, to take immediate action to overcome the current road safety, infrastructure integrity, amenity issues related to heavy vehicle traffic on Chapel Lane and Middle Hut Road in Doreen by 1, commencing the process to implement traffic interventions such as load limits and or truck bans on Chapel Lane between Yin Yin Road and Hesbridge, Arthurs Creek Road and Middle Hut Road between Brox Road and Arthurs Creek Road in consultation with the CFA, and where required with the approval of the Department of Transport. I don't think that's actually the one that Yelmar was providing advice on, officers. No, wait a minute. It's just the copy that I've got is been forwarded to me in light yellow print, and it's very hard to read. No, it is. I think it is on our reread.
It is, Councillor Clark.
It's just the one I've got, as I said, is in yellow, and it's very hard to read it. 2, enforcing the ban on all trucks accepting council and emergency vehicles over any load limit approved, and a request for support of the Victoria Police regarding this enforcement. 3, seek approval from the Victorian State Government Department of Transport to impose a 50-kilometre speed limit on Chapel Lane and Middle Hut Road, extent of opposition as per item above. 4, advising the owners and operators of the current landfill activities at 130 and 265 Chapel Lane that have failed to obtain a permit to build a crossover for works 500 metres east of Middle Hut Roads in the vehicle entry point to 130 Chapel Lane, Doreen. And 5, issue enforcement orders and seek all available penalties as a consequence for the destruction of road pavements and infrastructure in the vicinity of the sites at 130 and 265 Chapel Lane, Doreen.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Ashton.
Councillors, this is a bit different to what I circulated earlier on today, because I was seeking to be a bit more prescriptive and note specifically 10-tonne load limits and be, I guess, even more direct than what this recommendation proposes. I do accept that a more general commentary around the load limit is probably appropriate, because it does need to be worked through the Department of Transport, CFA and any other emergency vehicles, because we do need to be able to still provide protection to residents and services along the journey. We're simply trying to manage this stretch of road to overcome the destruction of the pavement and the convoy of trucks, which are providing an ever-increasing safety concern for residents. Equally, I don't want to paint this as a panacea that we can put signs up tomorrow and all will be well. We don't have that privilege. We don't have that authority. We are required to go through a process with the Department of Transport and seek approvals to be able to do what we want to do and submit the appropriate documentation to justify what we were doing. We and some in the community might see this as a bit of a no-brainer to do it and a way to manage this. Unfortunately, there are processes in place, so it's not going to happen overnight. And I'm sure Councillor Brooker will outline the problems that he has had trying to achieve similar things in his ward, which took far too long, in my view. Suffice to say, we are on the radar of government for this matter. I note in emails even that I've received tonight whilst I've been sitting here on an email website put together by a group called of Wedge Tales, which, whilst inaccurate in most part, is certainly instructive in that they claim that this only started 2 years ago when I was mayor. Far from the point. This started back in 2014 when Councillor Perkins was the only one here, when they sought the certificate. And so it didn't resurface in any substantial way until residents brought to our attention a few months back. And so we've been actively trying to resolve this matter since. Equally, you might say we had some reliance upon correspondence from the Planning Minister indicating he was looking into this matter, which he took to the last election at the encouragement of the Greenwich Coalition, but has not resolved that matter. Indeed, I received again while I was sitting here tonight a response to my numerous emails to the Minister in the last 3 weeks, and in particular to Jane Homewood, who has been dealing with this particular matter. I've been seeking responses as to where they're up to in the resolution of the Minister's earlier report dealing with these issues. which they thought they were going to be able to get resolved by Christmas of last year, which clearly didn't occur. But suffice to say, it is on the agenda of government. They are watching what we're doing, and indeed, as I said in that email, there was a note from the local member from Yan Yean noting that the Shire was pursuing these matters. Again, some of her commentary was inaccurate, sometimes the case with that local member, but nonetheless, she was very keen to understand that we were watching this very closely and seeking to do everything we could in our power to enact matters. And we did, and we have done that. We have indeed, which part A of my resolution talks to, and I'm keen it goes up on the website if this resolution is passed tomorrow. Now forwarded to the Minister, our planning scheme amendment C130 and 3131, which is for the longer term planning scheme amendment to stop this sort of large scale dumping of clean fill on Greenwich land, and also gives him the planning scheme amendment to be able to adopt immediately. So that work is done, has been lodged, we've paid all the fees, all the work is there for the government to deal with. And so we encourage the government to work with us on that. We are taking, as we would put up on our website, the various actions now under our own planning scheme, requiring permits to be obtained and setting out the circumstances by which we are going to pursue the relevant enforcement opportunities that we have to protect this. We've done the work. It's taken a bit longer than I'm sure we all would have liked, but it's been done and we will take that action. And now I'm trying to set in train the processes for dealing with the traffic management issues. So if all else fails, we can start to deal with those, because some of these other matters, even the planning stuff, if it goes off to VCAT, may well take months to get hearings. And so we need to deal with the safety issues in the shortest possible period. So, you know, I'm sure the Mayor and others will seek representations to the ministers to see whether we can meet with them to try and hurry these things along. And I'm confident we'll get the support of the local member for Yan Yean to encourage that work as well, because we're all trying to get towards the same end. I would hope we might do it a bit more cooperatively with some of the public comment thus far.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, the meeting last week and the submissions we heard from residents, you know, it's a real issue. And I think that we're not the only Greenwich Shire that's dealing with this. I'm aware that there's a new consultation document coming out with regard to agricultural land and planning in the Green Wedge, and I would hope that there may be some decision in that document with regard to this issue, that would be the place for this to be. It's an issue that many Green Wedges are facing, and in a way, state government needs to help us resolve this, as well as us looking at what's happening in other local councils. But you know, we can't be used as dumping grounds. The item, you know, last week when somebody said that this was an agricultural improvement exercise was laughable. So yeah, I think we have to act to try and do what we can, and that might be small actions now and other actions in the longer term. But yeah, I'm very supportive of the recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillors, any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Thank you. Yeah, look, yeah, I have no issue with the motion. The motion's a good start, but it could be improved. But you know, and I broadly support the motion, but I'd like to introduce an amendment to the motion, and that amendment would become a new Part A, that Council resolve to.
Have you got it up on it?
No, I'll read it out slowly.
Okay.
Have you got anyone that can type?
Margaret, can we get someone to type this up?
Just one moment, I'll get somebody to type it up.
Just one moment, Councillor Perkins. If we can get up Councillor Clark's and this go on the bottom.
So this amendment is to become at the top. So dot point A, Yep. As soon as is practicable. Officers to commence enforcement proceedings and apply an interim enforcement order relating to the development of the land at 265 Chapel Lane, Doreen. So that's the amendment. B becomes C, C becomes D.
Councillor Clark.
Mayor, I can't accept all of it. And indeed, I would suggest he needs another component. So I'm not quite sure whether Councillor Perkins.
I was actually just looking for a seconder. I wasn't requesting the support of the mover. I was just looking for a seconder, and if it's seconded, we can talk about it.
Yes, but it's equally easier if it's incorporated. So can I just ask why you've not included 130 Chapel Lane as well?
Yeah, that was my question.
My understanding is that 130 is a work in progress still. We're still waiting on some advice to firm that up. The briefings earlier indicated to me that it wasn't appropriate to include 130.
All right, do you have a seconder? Councillor Demerick?
All right, so I'll talk to the motion if that's okay, or to the amendment. So, I'm not going to say a lot for obvious reasons, but, I do believe this to be the elephant in the room. This is the thing that council has to do. Council has to demonstrate some leadership. While we can, deflect to the state government, and I don't have a problem with state government playing their part in the broader issue of protecting green wedges more broadly and helping this and other issues out. I'm conscious of the fact that this is the Nillumbik planning scheme that we're dealing with, and we are the planning authority. The substantive matter is for us to control and for us to show some leadership on at this time. We can continue to do some work with others. I'm very, very keen to put this matter to bed. To give some clear indication to the community that this is what we're on about. We've collected enough data. We've got enough advice. It's been going on for a long time, and we actually are instructing officers to take action. That's the purpose of this amendment. It builds on Councillor Clark's motion, which doesn't do any harm. But this is it. Support this motion. We can move on. It gives all the residents clarity, not just those in Chapel Lane, but across the Shire. Council have to stand up and act on behalf of its own planning scheme. We can argue that there's more the state government can do, and I've never had an issue with writing letters and doing advocacy to the state government. That's all well and good, but we've got to do our part as well. And I think this is it. Actually, I won't go into much more of the advice that I've been provided by officers, but it's time. I hope this motion gets support of council.
Councillor Demerick? Sorry. Just one moment. Sorry, Councillor Clark.
My question is a procedural one. With the inclusion that Councillor Perkins has made, my question is, given the sensitivities of this, whether we should be debating Councillor Perkins' motion in confidential, given what we know.
Question to to governance, or?
Correct.
Yeah.
Governance or the CEO. Sorry.
I can answer part of the question. To have a full debate on the particulars of any potential investigation or procedural matters in regards to legal context, it would be hard to have a full debate in public forum. So, and we could prejudice council. So I would refrain from being able to discuss too openly about what council's decisions will be moving forward.
Thank you.
Quite sure what that answer is. I don't know whether the CEO can shed any other light, whether his view would be whether we should.
I think
my resolution in open and then debate Councillor Perkins' resolution in confidential.
Councillor, Mr. Carl.
I have no problem in debating it. It's just the question is, what is the best forum given the circumstances that we know we are confronting?
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Mayor. It does take a few seconds to get unmuted, which is a bit of a chore. But no, I favour an open discussion on part of the matter and the matter regarding enforcement with the potential implications for us. That should be debated in confidential. And as such time as we quite often do when these matters are resolved, we can make the community aware of what the decision has been, but we haven't had the discussion yet.
Thank you. So basically my decision will be based on the advice from governance and the CEO. We need to debate Councillor Clark's part of the motion in public, and then we'll go into confidential for yours, Councillor Perkins, but we're still at the stage where Councillor Clark has to, or we need to vote on your part of the motion first, but without speaking to it. Is that the correct procedure, Blago?
So at the moment we have an amendment on the table, Mayor.
So we need to vote on that.
We'd need to deal with the amendment, and if that's the confidential element.
Yes, so without speaking to it.
It's either that or there's a motion to go into confidential to discuss that element of the amendment.
All right.
The resolution can be passed by council under the Local Government Act to deal with the amendment, which is the reason we're putting it into confidential is because of possible enforcement action.
And legal proceedings. All right. Well, can I have a mover to send us?
So I've just got Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, you're on.
Might I just suggest that given that Councillor Perkins' resolution is if you like, a new A, that we simply debate my resolution, which is B and C.
Yes.
Is a resolution, and then go into confidential and debate Councillor Perkins' resolution, which is the part A. That enables us to then have an open and public debate in B and C and have the confidential debate about item A. I can't see how we can vote on item A without having a debate, and the only way we can have a debate is if we are in confidential out of the advice that we have.
All right. Barger, Councillor Perkins, you happy with that?
Well, not really. Given that we know what councillors' view is. We just need to vote. There's councillors in the chamber who, more often than not, just put their hand up in accordance with what their view is. I agree. I didn't say much in my debate. I've put the motion up. All we need is a vote.
Quite frankly, Councillor Perkins, I don't trust people not to speak about it, which puts us in a precarious position from a legal point of view. So we will go into...
I will move then that we debate, we can resolve it by way of resolution, that we debate item B and C of the resolution in open, and then we move into confidential to vote item A, which is Councillor Perkins' resolution. I so move procedurally.
All right, can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Rankin. Councillor Brooker.
My understanding from what Barker just said was we had to deal with the amendment first. And what Councillor Clark is suggesting is we're not doing that. So have I That's understood.
Deal with it as two separate resolutions, so that one is debated in confidential and the other parts are debated in the open.
Okay, so how does that affect the amendment? Because that was what was put originally.
Well, the argument would be that we couldn't debate the amendment if it's dealt with. I mean, whether it's an amendment or whether it's a separate resolution.
Separate motion doesn't really matter.
The question
Well,
is,
it's an amendment and it's on the table. It has to be dealt with before we move on to another motion. That clearly, Blaga, can I get some advice there? That's my understanding of governance.
I'm moving a procedural motion to put to the vote for that purpose. But anyway.
Blaga, can you sort this out? Because it's unprecedented with what we've had to deal with previously.
Yeah. So, prior to my I've got Councillor Ashton who had her hand up. I'm not sure if she wants to add anything before I respond to that.
I don't see why we can't just vote on it, including the item A. I don't know whether we need to have a debate on it. I think we've had a discussion earlier today. Public have now seen item A. We don't need to go into the implications of that. Why can't we just vote for the whole recommendation as it stands?
So, through the chair, but just to answer the question from Councillor Perkins, we have to, there is an amendment on the table, a motion on the table. There is no procedural motion to allow for the motion to be split, or the amendment not to be heard, and for a procedural resolution to be made on this in this matter. So, going by the local law, we have to deal with the amendment first. But if we wanted to deal with the amendment in confidential, we could move a resolution to go into confidential to be able to deal with it, debate it.
Which is what I started to do 5 minutes ago before everybody said what they...
But it has to happen. So the amendment has to be heard first prior to the substantive motion.
Correct. So that means we either go into confidential for your amendment or not. And to be honest, I would rather feel much more comfortable after the advice of the CEO and governance to go into confidential. So you're putting your hand up to go into confidential, Councillor Perkins? Just a nod will do. One last comment.
I think you're misinterpreting the advice of the governance officer, and that is that the amendment has to be dealt with. We've got it. We've got it. You know, we've got a local law. Amendment's been put. It's been seconded. Yes, we don't have to debate the amendment, but we need to vote on it, and then move on. Like that's clear. There's no.
You're already on, Councillor Clark.
Mayor, I hear what Councillor Perkins is saying, but he can equally not prevent us from debating it. The local law provides for us to be able to debate an amendment. Either we debate the amendment now in the public or we debate the amendment in confidential. The question is where we debate it. I'm not debating we shouldn't debate it.
No.
The question is where we want to do it. So
I've made my decision and we're going to go into confidential. So can I have a mover to go into confidential for the amendment, please?
Sorry, through the chair, can we just confirm the reasons why we're going into confidential under the Local Government Act 2020? It's under section 3, and which provision we wanted to use in relation to that is provision D or 3.1D of the law enforcement information being information which if released would be reasonably likely to prejudice the investigation to any alleged breach of the law or the fair trial or hearing of any person.
Thank you very much, Blaga. I'm not going into any more conversation, Councillor Perkins. Can I have a mover for the motion to go into confidential, please? You moving it. Can I have a mover to go into confidential, please? Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder to go into confidential? Thank you, Councillor Rankin. So we will now go, everybody in favour? And that is carried. Thank you. I'm not going in any more discussion. This is turning into a circus. So we will go into confidential for Councillor Perkins' motion.
Just one moment, Councillor Egan. We just need to be able to stop live streaming. Yeah. If you just mind one moment, please.